All right. And here we go. Finally, we're back together here at this stage of React Global Online Summit 2023, Volume 2 from Geekle. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm so see all this community here. On this event, we have more than 100, 1,200 registrations, and I'm inviting here my friend and my partner and the person who is from the beginning with us, Paul. Paul, welcome. How are you, man? Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Doing great. Hi, everyone, and welcome to React JS Global Summit, React Global Online Summit. I always confuse the names, so but whatever. So I guess, this is our like eighth or seventh React Summit. So we really love this community, and we really appreciate you. And thank you for joining. Thank you for contributing, and huge thank you to everyone who helped us with this event. Yeah, and unfortunately, our community manager, she's not able to be with us today. She's unable to join. But big thank you to Sia, to every community member, to every program committee member, to everyone who contributed. And yeah, we're excited to talk about React, and the reason why I personally love this event, this community, because I this is probably one of few that I can still understand. Yeah, because I don't do Python, I don't do Java, so it's React and Flutter. Those two are I'm kind of senior trainee architect. Yeah, yeah, in those. So go figure it out. Yeah,
As
so
always,
this is one
yeah.
of those that still makes sense for me. Like when people like
All right.
explaining something. Yeah.
All right, right. And you forgot to mention you have almost 10 years experience with ChatGPT as always, right?
Yeah. As always, like 2 years here and eight in my previous incarnation. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love it. All right. Thank you, thank you for firing up this stream. And yes, we have this like quite large community of React users in Geekle, and as our normal tradition, we always do this. Please let us know in chat, where are you now? Where are you watching from? I mean, the country, city, maybe the room, or type of chair you are using for. But let us know, because it's that what excites us, and we feel like we're not alone here with Paul, but with you guys who are watching this stream. Also, of course, we have recordings, and actually, not only for full track, and if you don't have this full access, we this time we decided to make these recordings for junior track. So if you are interested, ping me or someone, or send any emails. Hey guys, I need some recordings for junior track, and we'll share it with you. And yeah, let's talk about this event. Paul, could you disclosure something for us? What to
Yeah.
expect,
Sure.
all this audience?
Yeah. So we're gonna have 21, if I'm still counting, or no, like 15 topics. We're gonna have 15 topics, during 16 topics during um, this event. So we will have six presentations today, and also 10 tomorrow. Yeah, so we will be covering lots of interesting stuff, and one of the topics that I think is really important, and we will be hearing about this today. We're going to be hearing a case study on accessibility. Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting one. If I'm not mistaken, we're going to be hearing about the accessibility case study, like story of masterclass. So probably everyone saw this website. Everyone saw the ads in their Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So pretty cool
And everywhere,
presentation.
yes.
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah, and we're going to be talking about like lots of interesting stuff. So how to deploy front end with Versal. We're going to have virtualization, lots of interesting topics like scaling UI, optimizing user effects, performance, and so development, like test driven development, and lots of interesting uh, presentations. Yeah, and so we're going to be hearing about components. So lots of stuff that is very important for every React engineer. And yeah, so for every JS engineer who's using React. And since React team hasn't um, published like anything big like for a year or so, so we're gonna be I would say we're gonna be sharpening our skills. So lots of interesting topics that can actually improve us as developers and help us to grow.
Right. Right. Thank you for this overview. So today's 6 speakers today, 10 tomorrow. Lots of interesting stuff. Yeah, and if you don't have this full access ticket, just find out on our website, and you probably can use this promo code. I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
here it is. Yeah, you can have the promo code React Live and get this discount of the last chance. And also, please pay attention for our upcoming events. Is sorry. UI UX Global Summit, which is really interesting event for UI UX designers and also for front end developers. Uh, Many interesting stuff about AR, about new trends in accessibility in UI UX. Yeah, so pay attention, please. And if you are interested also, or you have a team of QA engineers next to you, well, so working really hard on this QA Global Summit. So if they still need tickets, please pay attention to this. And thank you for listening these ads. And now we're going to thank to all speakers and program committee members and everyone who helped us to cook up this event. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for coming and sharing your time, knowledge, energy with our community. Thank you very much. Appreciate that a lot. And we have lots of people right in here. Hello everyone. Florida, really Florida. Oh my God, it's. I believe it's really early. I mean, even night there. Thank
It's
you, thank you
like
for
time to go to bed. Time to go to bed, I guess.
Oh,
In
really?
Florida.
All right. So Istanbul, Finland, and Florida too. All right, all right. Hello, and
Philippines.
yeah, Philippines, yes, and Krakow, Nigeria, Belgrade. Hello from California, of course, and Warsaw again, and Czech Republic. Lots of people. Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Spain. People from all around the world, and I'm so happy. Ukraine,
Poltava, Ukraine.
I was waiting for you people. Yeah, and yeah, lots of people from all around the world, from every corner, and it's an honor for me. Thank you for joining, for listening, for being really needed in these innovations. I'm sure we're done with all these announcements and
Mhm.
things and everything, or I'm missing something. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to every partner and every person who helped us with this event, like spreading love and spreading information. And yeah, so if you're interested in helping to build this community, if you want to spread some information, some word about your your project. Maybe you're doing some kind of you're working maybe on something like open source, or you're doing something cool for the React, maybe some kind of add-ons, maybe some kind of APIs or something like that. So you can always find me in LinkedIn. It's Paul Pancrata, or just shoot me an email. It's pp@geekle.us. And yeah, and let's build this React community together. And also Shivanji from India. Thank you. So I'm still reading where the people coming from.
Of course. And your questions, ask your question in chat, and Q&A session where speakers come in live, and we will have this session and we'll answer all these questions. Just find the speakers on our website and join them, LinkedIn, connect them any social media you want, and follow these cool people, because it's something they really expect from you, and that's a kind of community interaction. All right, we're done with all this, opening stuff. Let's move directly to the content and to our first speaker. Thank you, Paul, for joining us for this opening ceremony.
I'll see you in a couple hours.
Yeah, his blog will be next, and this first is mine. And let's dive into agenda. Now we're gonna hear from Zachary Reece. He's a senior React developer in Cloudwell, and that's an interesting topic about MUI version 5, enhancing the React developer experience with MUI. Well, Material UI is something interesting. I'm sure you all know this library. So let's just start and listen what he has for us.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here, so thank you very much to Geekle for having me. I started learning React 6 years ago, and in that time, we've seen the React ecosystem evolve dramatically. Many tools have come and gone, but some have stuck around and become integral to the projects we build today. For me, one of those integral tools is Material UI. Material UI is one of the most popular React component libraries. Now, GitHub stars don't mean everything, but they can be indicative of popularity and usage. And as you can see, Material UI trails significantly ahead of other leading React component libraries and similar packages. Material UI has continued to evolve, adding new components, new features, and tighter integration, which makes building with it an amazing experience for React developers. That's what I'm here to talk about today. What makes Material UI have such a great developer experience? First, let's take a small step back and ask a more fundamental question. What is a component library? A component library is a collection of React components that typically contains the most fundamental elements of a user interface. This includes elements like buttons, sliders, text fields, alerts, loading spinners, and more. You can then use these components as a foundation to then build more complex interfaces and components on top of them without having to build all of these common elements from scratch. This allows you to focus on building the more interesting and novel parts of your application. When dealing with a large number of components, it's difficult to ensure that they all look and behave consistently between components and across applications. That's why having a well-curated set of components to start with makes a huge difference and helps keep everything consistent. However, a component library is not just about components. Ideally, it should also be a toolkit containing all of the solutions for the most common tasks and problems faced when working with a large number of components. In my opinion, that's what makes Material UI so popular. It's not just the incredible suite of components, but also the robust system of tools it provides along with the components and how well it integrates all of that together. We'll see some specific examples in just a bit, but first let's talk a little bit more generally about Material UI and how its ecosystem is evolving beyond just a simple component library. Under the new brand MUI, it now encompasses multiple component libraries: Material UI, Joy UI, Base UI, MUIX, and MUI System. Each of these individual packages provides specific value in different use cases. Let's start by looking at this sort of family tree chart that illustrates the relationship between each of these libraries. So the family tree starts with just base UI. Now, base UI essentially takes all of the most fundamental components from Material UI and strips them down to their most basic implementation and styles. Not having extra styles is key and is primarily what distinguishes base UI from the other component libraries. This makes base UI components very easy to build on top of and provide all your own custom styles without all the default styles of the typical component library getting in your way. That's often one of the biggest challenges when using a component library, the ability to customize and override all the default styles and functionality. That's the main use case for base UI. You would use this when you want to use or build a component library, but you require extensive customization to get the exact look and feel required for your application. So instead of starting with a component library and trying to fight through overriding all the defaults, you can instead start from a mostly clean slate and then build up on your own however you'd like. This could be a great option when developing your own internal component library to use within your organization. Now, to streamline the process of building your own custom designs on top of base UI, they created MUI System. MUI System is a collection of CSS utilities that can be used with base UI, Material UI, Joy UI, and even third-party components. MUI System contains tools to allow you to quickly add styles and customizations while keeping everything consistent and integrated. MUI System is one of the many examples of this tightly integrated ecosystem that MUI is developing, giving you everything you need for your components in one place without having to string together multiple packages on your own. Next, Material UI and Joy UI can be thought of as siblings, both built on top of base UI. Base UI provides all the structure and functionality, and then Material UI and Joy UI each give you a different, more refined and opinionated flavor of design. Material UI adheres to Google's Material Design Specification, which is a design system providing standards and principles for creating user interfaces. If you like the style of material design, which resemble the Google family of products, then this is definitely the library for you. Because Material UI strictly adheres to the Material Design Specification, however, it is limited to only produce components and styles that fall under that umbrella. Sometimes, though, you may not want to stay within those guidelines and may opt for a different visual style. That's where Joy UI comes in. Joy UI is roughly the same set of components as Material UI, eventually it will be one-to-one, and it is also built on top of the foundational base UI components. However, it's an implementation of MUI's own custom design system rather than the Material Design spec. This allows for more flexibility, creativity, and a unique visual aesthetic. Here we can look at two separate pages, one built with Material UI and the other built with Joy UI. You can see that Material UI has a bit of a flatter design, while Joy UI has a little bit more details and colors and personality to it. So if your project doesn't need to follow the Material Design spec, then you might consider using Joy UI. The final node of our MUI family tree is MUI-X. MUI-X is a collection of complex, more powerful, more advanced components built on top of the regular Material UI components. These components are highly optimized for performance and suited for data-intensive applications. For example, the feature-rich data grid component can easily handle millions of cells of data in a React application. That's pretty awesome. The idea of having all of these components, tools, and systems integrated together in one ecosystem is a central pillar on which MUI is built. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the specific functionality of Material UI to see how that integration is implemented in ways that make for such a wonderful developer experience. I like to break the main features of Material UI down into 5 categories: the component library, the layout system, the styling system, theming system, and the responsive design system. Earlier, when I said that a component library isn't just about components, but also about the tools necessary to do all the things you need to do with components, this is what I was talking about. We're not just using components in isolation, we're using them in conjunction with one another and in the context of an entire application. When you view components in this broader context, you realize you need a lot more than just the component library to do things correctly and consistently. We'll quickly see some examples, and then we'll see some more in the demo at the end. So you have the components themselves, but then you need some way of consistently and predictably arranging them on the screen. That's where the layout system using the grid component comes in. The grid component is based on Flexbox, and it uses the familiar 12-column layout system commonly used in user interface design. This allows you to easily create complex layouts with many levels of nested components. Along with creating layouts with our components, we also need to customize the components to fit the specific look and feel of our application. It starts with the styling system, which is built using the Emotion CSS in JS library. This allows you to easily define styles within your components to customize and override the default component styles. Styling individual components is important, but when you're building a complete application, you also need to ensure that all the styles across components remains consistent. That's why the styling system is tightly integrated into an overall theming system, that allowing you to define global styles that can be easily accessed and applied from anywhere in your application and affect all components. Finally, our applications are dynamic and typically run on many different web-enabled devices, from the largest widescreen desktops to the smallest flip phones. It's your responsibility as a developer to ensure that your application provides an optimal experience for your users regardless of what device they're using. That's why Material UI has an amazing responsive design system perfectly integrated into the layout, styling, and theming system, allowing you to easily adapt your layouts and styles to any screen size. The way that Material UI has implemented these systems and integrated them together into one powerful, cohesive package is what makes it truly stand out above the rest compared to other React component libraries. We're about to do some actual coding and see for ourselves how great this implementation and integration really is. But before we do that though, I just want to make quick mention of some future developments that we can expect to see in the next major update to Material UI version 6. It's likely not coming out for a little while, but it's important to note for the overall evolution of the MUI ecosystem. I talked a lot about how Base UI is the foundation for Material UI and Joy UI, but technically that's only partially true at the moment. Material UI was developed before Base UI, and so there's a process of migration that must occur to fully refactor all the components to use the underlying Base UI counterparts. That migration is only partially complete at the moment, but it's slated to be completed in version 6. Version 6 will also include accessibility and performance improvements, as well as support for Material Design version 3. Now, one of the biggest changes scheduled for version 6 will be the implementation of a brand new, completely custom styling solution to replace Emotion. The main motivation for this change is to support the new paradigm of React server components. So that's really exciting, and the fact that the MUI team has chose to build their own solution to provide support for React server components while maintaining all of the existing functionality really shows their dedication and commitment to delivering the best possible developer experience. All right, that's enough talking. So hopefully now you understand the MUI ecosystem as a whole and some of its design decisions that from the start prioritize developer experience over anything by giving you powerful systems for composability and customization at every level. Now let's check out some actual code to see what that looks like in practice. Let's start by looking at the developer experience for applying customizations. All right, so the first step in applying customizations or styles to an MUI component, the SX prop allows us to pass whatever styles we want onto our component. It's essentially a superset of CSS. So all of our CSS properties we can set here along with some extra stuff that we'll see in just a little bit. So for example, if I want to change the background color, I can change that to black. I can change the font color to white, set a font size of 2 rem, and I'll go ahead and set a margin bottom of 3. I'll go ahead and save that so that we can see this a little bit better. And because we're using the SX prop here, we can actually use a couple different shorthands that make writing the styles a little bit quicker. So for example, instead of writing out the full background color property, we can just set BG color, and that does the same thing, just a little bit more concise. We can do the same thing with margin bottom. We can change that to just MB, and we see that that is still applied. We can also easily add hover styles in this case. So we can go ahead and add using the &:hover selector, and then all the styles that we pass inside of this object will only be applied when we're hovering over the element. So I could say a background color of 343434, and now when I hover over the button, we get that nice gray highlight. So very easy to add different hover styles and styles in other different states. For example, we can also add a different selector, $.mui-disabled. And now the styles that we pass here will only be applied if the button is in the disabled state. So for example, if I go ahead and right now just set disabled to true on the button, we see it gets grayed out. But inside of our disabled selector, I could go ahead and add a color of black. And then we see that the text goes to black. But if I turn disabled off, it goes back to the previous styles because this is only applied when the button is disabled. We can even apply different styles based on the different props that are being passed to the button. For example, the different variant that the button is set to, we can easily set styles that are only applied for a specific variant. So for example, up at the top, we can go ahead and import the different button classes from Material UI. And then we can add a new selector here. We're going to need to use a computed object property. So I'll use brackets and then a template string, and I'll do the ampersand dot, and then I will inject the button classes dot contained. And then if we go ahead and open that up, and we can take all of our existing styles and cut it and paste it inside of there. And we see that the styles are still applied, but now they're only being applied if the button is a variant of contained. So if I switch this to a variant of outlined, we see that it goes back to the default styles. They have classes like this exported for every single component, making it really easy to override the default styles for any component and any state that the component could be in. I'll go ahead and switch that back. And now let's go ahead and set up a custom theme so that we can see how the theming system is tied into this SX prop for styles. So let's go ahead and switch to the index.js file in this case. And I'll go ahead and import create theme and the theme provider from Material UI. And now I'll go ahead and create a const of theme equal to create theme. And we'll go ahead and pass inside an object. Now, Material UI comes with a default theme that is loaded with tons of properties and colors and helpful utilities for applying your different styles. And when we use this create theme, it takes whatever properties we set in here and just overrides and merges that with the default theme. So we don't have to worry about resetting every single property. It'll only merge the properties that we define and keep all the rest of the defaults. Now, one of the main features of the theme is the palette. And the palette is where we store all of the different colors for our application. So it comes with a primary color and a secondary color set by default. And these colors serve as the main color and the accent color for most of the components in the library. So for example, if I set the primary color here, we set the primary.main color, and we'll set that to a green. And then we'll go ahead and set the secondary color, secondary.main, and we'll set that to an orange, FFA500. Okay, and the reason we set it as primary.main is because the theme will actually automatically create a primary.light and a primary.dark in addition to your primary.main. So it's a cool little extra feature. Now, we're not just limited to the primary and secondary colors either. We could also, if we want, go ahead and set a custom colors object, and inside of here, add whatever extra colors we want to easily access. So for example, we could set a royal blue of 4169E1, and now we'll have easy access to the custom colors as well. So now to actually enable this theme, let's go ahead and wrap our app in a theme provider and pass it the theme that we just created, and go ahead and close that off. All right, so now if we go back to our app.js, if I were to import, say, the checkbox component, and I could go under here and just render a checkbox, we see that we get this checkbox, and by default, it already has our green primary color. We could also set the color to secondary, and there's our orange color. So the primary and secondary colors directly integrate with all of the components in the library and can easily be applied by using the color prop. Now, what about the custom colors? Well, that's where there's an awesome integration with the theme and the SX prop. So inside of our SX prop on the button, instead of setting our background color to black, we could instead set it to the string custom colors .royal blue. And there we see that that blue color has taken effect. And that's because when we're setting color properties in the SX prop, we can use this shorthand to access any colors inside of the palette. So for example, we could also do a secondary.main, and that does the same. We could also do secondary.dark. And you see that there's the darker version that I mentioned. So that's a really nice way to be able to access the colors really conveniently within the SX prop, even if you're using custom colors and a completely custom object structure besides what the default theme provides. So that's pretty sweet. Similarly, we may want to apply other styles from the theme that aren't part of the palette. In that case, we can simply set the property to a function, and then that function will receive the theme. So for example, we could set a box shadow property here, and let's set that to a function that will receive the theme. And then we can simply set the theme.shadows, for example. It's one of the other styles that the theme provides. And now we see we have a bit of a drop shadow around the button. If I change that from 5 to 15, you can see that the shadow gets darker and larger. So they have a lot of different shadows and other styles easily accessible in the theme, and very conveniently accessible from the SX prop to be able to set those properties from the theme directly in your styles. Now, the theme integration in the SX prop is incredible, but that's not all. There's also a integration with the responsive design system, where we can set any property we want to an object, and inside of that object set different values for different breakpoints of screen sizes. Now, these breakpoints are wired up to the theme, so you can customize the exact breakpoint screen pixel values if you'd like, but the defaults work fine for me. So for example, we can change our margin bottom. Instead of just setting it to 3, let's set it to an object. And here we can set the extra small screen size to 4, the small to 3, medium to 2, large to 1, and extra large to 0. And now at each of these screen sizes, a different value will be applied to the margin bottom. So for example, we see that right now we have a pretty good amount of space underneath the button, but as I expand to make the window larger, we can see that the margin shrinks. And when I go backwards, the same thing is applied, and it automatically is adjusting that style based on the screen size. So that's really cool and such a convenient way to be able to define those responsive styles without having to jump through a bunch of other hoops. Now, this is really nice for being able to apply styles very quickly to one individual component, but what if we wanted a reusable version of this button that already had these styles applied that we could then use throughout anywhere in our application? Well, then we can do that with a different utility, the styled function. And it has similar syntax to the styled components library, if you've seen that before. So if I go ahead and import styled from MUI materials/styles, we can then go ahead and create a const of custom button equals a styled button. So we pass the component into the styled function, and then we call that result and pass inside of it the styles that we want to apply in an object here. So for example, I could go ahead and cut all of the styles from our SX prop on the button and paste them inside of our new custom styled object. Now, if we go and switch this button here to a custom button with our custom styles, well, we see that some of it is being applied, like the font size clearly worked, but some of the other styles aren't working. That's because the shorthand here and this responsive design integration, those shortcuts only work inside of the SX prop, and it works a little bit differently inside of the styled utility. So we have to change things up just a little bit. Now, we could change some of these styles and make it work just like it is in the styled utility, but it'd be a little bit more verbose. Instead, there's a different option that allows us to keep the SX syntax because I really like that shorthand, even when we're using the styled utility. So instead of just calling this and passing in the styled object, let's actually go ahead and pass in an arrow function, and that arrow function will receive the theme. We'll go ahead and destructure it out, and then I'll add the extra set of parentheses here to return that object. But now we have access to our theme. And what we can do to keep the SX syntax is we can call the theme.unstablesx and then pass that our styled object. And now we see that all the styles are working just like before. So now we could go ahead and reuse this custom button all over the application without having to reapply all those styles. Now, in addition to the theme, we also get a different parameter here, and that is the owner state. The owner state is the rest of the arguments that are being passed here, and that actually contains all of the props for the button. So we can use this to apply different styles based on the props. So for example, on our color property, we could check if the owner state dot size is equal to small, and if true, go ahead and use the white value. Otherwise, we'll set it to black. So now you see that the black text is appearing, but if I go ahead and on our custom button, set the size equal to small, now we see the white text appearing. So it's really powerful to be able to adjust these styles and make them dynamic based on the props that are being passed in for different properties. So now we have a reusable version of this component, but what if we wanted to make every single button in our application have specific styles without having to use one of these custom components? We just want it right out of the gate. When we import the button component, we want it to already have some default styles. Well, we can easily apply default styles and even default props using the theme. So if we switch back to the theme that we created, if we go outside of the palette, so I'll go outside of that, we can set the components property. And in here, we can set some overrides for the components. So we'll specify the MUI button component. And then here, I want to set some default props for every single button in the application. And let's set the disable ripple prop to true for every button. Okay, so it was already disabled for this button, but now if I go ahead and I were to go under this extra text and render a button and say new button, now if I go ahead and click that, we see that the ripple is not appearing at all. And that's because we set that default prop to apply to every button component in the application. We can do the same thing with styles too. So if we go inside of our button selector, but outside of the default props, we can set style overrides. As the name suggests, of course, we can pass different styles to override the defaults in different cases. So in this case, let's set for the outlined. So when the button is set to outlined, we could pass some styles directly like this, or just like in the styled version, we can pass an arrow function, and that will receive the theme and the owner state and set that to return an object. And inside of here, we could set the color, and we could check the owner state and check the size property again and say if that's equal to small. Then let's set the color to red. Otherwise, let's set it to black. And we could even do something like border color and check the owner state and do something like my custom prop. So any custom prop that you want to add onto the components, we could check that and see if that is true. Let's also set it to red. Otherwise, let's go ahead and set it to our theme.palette.customcolors.royal blue. So again, we're not limited to just the default structure that is provided by the theme or the component props. We can completely add our own custom values as well, making this even more powerful. I'll go ahead and save that so we can see that a little bit better. Okay, and so now if we switch back to our app and we set our new button to a variant of outlined, we see that we get the black text and the royal blue outline. But now if I set the size to small, we see that we get the red text. And now if we go ahead and set my custom prop to true, then we also get the red border. So that's really awesome. That's a really powerful way to apply custom styles globally to different components throughout your application. So hopefully you're starting to see just how powerful and flexible the styling and theming systems are, and how the tight integration with the component library, like getting access to the component props within your styles, makes it even more useful. So now we've seen how we have very simple and convenient ways of styling our components based on how they're going to be used, whether it's a one-off style, a reusable style, or a global style affecting every component. We've also seen the amazing integration of the theming system and responsive design system with the SX prop, and how easy that makes it to add dynamic styles. In my opinion, having all of this wrapped into one powerful package makes for an unmatched developer experience. Let's finish up by looking at the developer experience for composability in Material UI. To illustrate this, I'll use one of the MUI-X components, the data grid. The data grid is one of the best examples of composability in MUI, in my opinion. And my definition of composability here is the ability of complex components with many subcomponents to be able to swap out and customize those subcomponents, or in other words, to be able to compose many different smaller components into the larger big component. All right, so now we should be able to go to our app and import the data grid demo from that file. And let's go ahead and come under here and render our data grid demo. And there we go. We see we now have a nice, simple data table displaying our information. It may look basic right now, but it's actually a very powerful and complex component with tons of functionality. It's made up of many different pieces, each themselves built with many different Material UI components. The different pieces or sections of the data grid are referred to as slots. So for example, if we switch back to the data grid demo, let's import the grid toolbar component. And then on our data grid, we can set the slots prop. And here we have all the different pieces of the data grid that we can override or customize. So for example, we can take the toolbar slot and pass in the default grid toolbar component. And now we see that we have a toolbar containing different pieces of functionality quickly available to us right at the top. That's really nice. But what's even better is that we also have the slots prop. And that allows us to easily pass whatever props we'd like down to each slot, making this really flexible and customizable. So for example, here we could set the toolbar slot and we could pass whatever props we want. So we could pass it an on click and just say that that's an arrow function that console logs clicked toolbar. Okay, I'll save that so we can see a little bit better. And now if I open up our console and click on our toolbar, we see that that indeed fires our function. So that is what makes this so powerful and so composable, is the ability to take in these different slots, swap them in and out, and even customize them with different props for different functionality. This entire data grid, like all MUI components, is completely built around this concept of composability. And it's far more powerful than just this. For example, we don't have to just pass the default grid toolbar. We could pass a completely custom component. Making that even easier in this case is that the grid toolbar is itself composed of multiple different components that are easily exposed to us that we can use to build our own custom toolbar. For example, we could change this to import the grid toolbar container and then the grid toolbar export and grid toolbar density selector. Okay, now we can go ahead and above this, let's create a function called custom toolbar, accept some props, and we'll return the grid toolbar container. Let's go ahead and spread those props onto that so we make sure we retain all the default functionality. And then we can set the grid toolbar export component and the grid toolbar density selector components there. Now we can replace our grid toolbar down here with our custom toolbar that we just created. And once this loads, we see that now we have a custom toolbar with only those two options that we selected. That's really cool. And of course, we could then also build in our own custom buttons into here for custom toolbar functionality, making it seamless to integrate the default functionality with whatever custom features we'd like. That's so nice. I'll show one last example of how nicely composability is set up throughout MUI. Now, notice in the grid footer down here where we have the row count, and then we have these arrows allowing us to navigate between different pages if there were different pages. Let's set it up so that we do break our data onto different pages so that we can see one other trick. So let's go ahead and we will set the initial state of the data grid. And here we want to set the pagination state, and there we'll set the pagination model, and that contains the page size. So what is the currently selected page size? And I'll say the page size is starting out at 1. And then let's go ahead and set our page size options. equal to an array with 1, 3, and 5. Okay, so now if we go ahead and refresh our sandbox here, we see that now it defaults to just displaying 1 row per page, and we can use the arrows to toggle between the different pages. But we can also expand this a little bit, and now we see we have an option to select how many rows per page we want based on the page size options we just defined. So we could display 3 rows per page, 5, which it would be all of them because we only have 4 in this case, or just 1. Now, this rows per page selector, what if we wanted to not replace this component entirely, but we just want to pass some styles down to this menu here and say change the background color and text color of this menu? We can easily do this using the slot props. So I'll go ahead and shrink this down just for now so that we can see as we're writing out this code. And let's go ahead and break this apart onto some different lines. Okay, so now let's set in our slot props. We want to pass some props down to the pagination slot, just like we had already seen setting with the initial state. And then inside of the pagination slot, we can set the select props. And the select props are going to be props that are passed down to the select component, which comprises the dropdown, as well as options for customizing the icon here and the number that's being displayed when the menu is not open. Then inside of select props, we can pass the menu props. And as the name suggests, the menu props are applied to the actual menu that is open. And lastly, inside of the menu props, we can specify the paper props. And the paper component is what actually serves as the background of the menu. And here, just like we would apply the styles to any other MUI component, we use the SX prop. So just like we used it to apply styles to our button component, we can easily use that to apply styles here. Like if we set a background color of 343434 and a color of white, we see that now that takes effect. And so because of the composability principles that MUI is built on, we can so easily pass down styles and props and whatever functionality we'd like all the way through different slots and all the different subcomponents down to exactly what we want. That's such an important feature for component libraries, especially as they grow larger and more complex with deeper levels of nesting. This allows you to easily customize whatever you want at any level without getting locked into the defaults. That's really amazing, and I definitely have not seen any other library do it quite as well as MUI. All right, well, hopefully I've given you a glimpse of the awesome developer experience in Material UI and provided you with some overall context of the entire MUI ecosystem and how it's evolving to continue to improve both the user experience and the developer experience moving forward. Be on the lookout for my new series, Mastering MUI, coming in 2024. Thank you very much.
All right, that was actually intense. That was fast. I'm not sure, guys. What do you think about this playback speed? Actually, it was so compressed bunch of information we got here. Well, what still nice examples and everything. What let us know in chat. It's something new for us because this speaker decided to compress a little his talk to deliver more value in a short time, and I really love this idea, but I'm not sure how do you feel about this. Anyway, thank you very much, and please pay attention to this course. I'm sure it's super beneficial because this guy seems like he knows what he's saying about, and I'm sure it's worth to learn from him. All right. So yeah, we are moving on. I'm trying to find your answers in the chat. For me, it was okay. Someone from good morning from Arizona and good morning in Arizona and back. Hello from Bangladesh. Hello, Nigeria, and lots of people chatting from Romania, and they kind of found each other in our chat, and I'm happy for them. It was fine for me. Very interesting. I'm sure it is. Yeah, I find this really interesting topic and really interesting changes in this material UI. And now we're moving on. We're going to our next presentation is from Alexandra Spalato, developer relations engineer from Storyblok, and they talk about Remix. It's something we need to know probably, and lots of let's just listen to her. She has something really interesting for all of us. All right, let's do it.
So, hello, I'm Alexandra Spalato. I'm a developer relation engineer at Storyblock. And my topic today is how Remix is embracing web standards to redefine modern web development. So first, let's dive into the evolution of web development. Web development is all about transforming data into HTML and delivering it to the browser for rendering. But let's take a trip down memory lane. Remember when web development was all about server-side rendering? You make a request to the server, the page will be rendered using a templating language, and then it be sent back to the browser. JavaScript was like the cherry on top, used sparingly to add a dash of interactivity. But then, like a plot twist in a movie, JavaScript frameworks like React, Vue, Svelte, Angular, and meta frameworks like Next, Nux, Gatsby came onto the scene. And with them, the concept of universal JavaScript was born. This is like the superhero version of JavaScript. It can run on the client and on the server. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. The challenges we face in modern web development. Scalability. Your app needs always to have more users, more data, more complexity without crashing. New frameworks are popping up every week. It's like a fashion trend. So keeping up with the latest and the greatest can be exhausting and time consuming. Performance. Nobody likes a slow website. Browser compatibility. Our app need to work seamlessly across all browsers. UI and UX, this is all about the users. Developer experience, this is about us developers. We want our tool to be powerful, but also to be intuitive and enjoyable to use. Security, we need to protect our users' data. Okay, don't worry. I'm not here to talk only about problems. I'm here to talk about solutions, and this is where Remix comes in. So what's Remix all about? Imagine if a server-rendered framework and React had a baby. That's Remix. It's got the scalability of a chameleon. It can handle complex applications, but it can also scale down to the point where you don't even need JavaScript on the page. And the best part is built on web standards. So it's like speaking the browser's native language. It has a server client model, so you can filter the data from the server and only deliver what is necessary to the user. And this will enhance your app's speed and scalability. It's built on web standards, so it's like a universal adapter working seamlessly across different browsers. JavaScript is like the icing on the cake. It enhances the user experience, but the app still works great even without it. It avoids over abstraction. Learning a new framework can feel like learning a new language, and to find out that it's only spoken on a tiny island. So with Remix, you're learning the language of the web, not just a single framework. So as you get better at Remix, you're actually becoming a better web developer. And by sticking to web standards and best practice, it helps to keep things secure. So let's dive into how Remix streamlines our development process with web standards. First off, Remix loves URLs. URLs are the backbone of the web, the address of every little piece of content on the internet. And Remix embraces this and uses URLs to manage routing and data loading. Next up, we have the Fetch API. This is your tool for data handling. And let's talk about HTML. It's the language of the web, and it's been around since the dawn of internet. So Remix uses HTML to its full potential. And last but not least, we have HTTP caching. By leveraging the browser's built-in caching mechanisms, Remix can drastically improve the performance of your web application. So let's talk about URLs. In Remix, they're kind of a big deal. They're not just addresses. They're the backbone of your web architecture. Imagine a URL as a path, and each segment of this path corresponds to a nested layout in your UI. In Remix, you can collocate your UI and data handling code in the same file. We're talking about full stack components. Remix also optimizes your client-side navigation. It knows which layouts will persist between two URLs, so it only fetches the data for the ones that are changing. And on top of it, Remix can prefetch all resources for a page when the user is about to click a link. So next time you look at a URL, remember, in Remix is not just an address, it's a powerful tool that shapes your web architecture, optimizes your navigation, and streamlines your development process. So now let's dive into the Fetch API in Remix. It's like your personal postman, delivering data from the web to your app. It manages request and responses objects, your outgoing and incoming data messages. And we have also headers which are similar to the address on an envelope. They carry additional information about the request or response, like the destination or the type of data being sent. The fetch method takes your request, delivers your response, and can be called from anywhere in your app. Loader functions in Remix are functions that fetch data from the server for your components. There's a backbone of your app's data flow. And Remix adds request, response, headers, and fetch to your loader's global context. This means you can use them anywhere in your app, just like you would in the browser. And lastly, we also have helpers methods like JSON and redirects that streamlines working with the Fetch API. So with the Fetch API in Remix, handling data is as easy as sending a letter. So now let's dive into data rights or mutations in Remix. The magic is based on two basics web stuff, HTML, forms, and HTTP. Again, Remix is taking us back to the basics, but with a modern twist. When we talk about creating, deleting, or updating data on our website, we're really talking about form submission, and it's not just for your big complex form like a user profile edit page. Even the little like buttons are forms in disguise. So we have the Remix form components, which has some special feature to the usual HTML form. After a form submission, all the loaders on the page automatically refresh, showing users the latest info without needing to refresh the page. With form, your page doesn't reload after a form submission, providing a smoother user experience. And then we can use hooks like use navigation that give us access to the pending form states. So we can build a user experience that's as smooth as butter. Think about loading indicators, optimistic UI, and all this good stuff. So in Remix, action functions looks after form submissions, while loader functions take care of getting the data. HTTP caching is a powerful feature that can really improve the performance of your web application. It's like giving a memory to your app. Instead of constantly asking the server for data, your app can remember some of it, reducing the load on your server and speeding up response times for your users. In Remix, HTTP caching is used to its full potential. But what about updates? Well, HTTP caching in Remix is smart. It knows when to update the data. And this is where cache control comes in. You can define cache control headers right in your root modules. For example, you can set max age equal 300 to tell the browser to keep the cached data for 300 seconds. So with HTTP caching, your web app becomes faster, your server gets less stress, and your user stays happy. It's a win-win-win situation. In this example, the headers function is exporting an object with a cache control property. The value of this property is a string that tells the browser how to cache the response. The max age directives specify the maximum amount of time in seconds that the fetched response is allowed to be cached. So in this case, it's set to 300 seconds or 5 minutes. So this code is essentially telling the browser, hey, you can store this response and use it up to 5 minutes without checking back with the server. And you can find many other directives in MDN docs. As again, this is a web standard. So now it's time to dive in code with an example. So I don't know about you, but for me, building a global search has always been super tedious. You need to store the data from the form into the state and into the context, etc. Well, it's very tedious. And so when I built one with Remix, I was building a blog with a global search. I was amazed about how simple it was. So I wrote a tutorial about it, and you can get this tutorial here, and there you will find also the repo and all the code that I'm going to show now. So I let you a few seconds to scan this QR code, and then we will dive into the demo and into the code. Okay, so I hope you have scanned it. So this is the small website I built for the occasion. So it's a simple blog. We have a home page, an about page, and a blog with some posts. And here we have the single post with a title, an image, and text. And here we have the search form. So we can, which is in the model, here we type our query and it redirect to the search result route and attach the query to the URL and display the result by pages and post. This is the tutorial, by the way. And this is the back office, which is built with Storyblock, my favorite headless CMS. And so if we go to the blog post here, we can see that we have a headline field, an image field, and a text field. So we want to search if our query is present within the headline or within the text. And if we go to the pages, because we are also searching in the pages here, so we go to the home page. Here we have a body field, so we want to search if our query is present in the body field. Okay, so let's dive into the code. So here is the repo. So I have this search form, and I'm using the form component. This search form is inside this index into the overlay, which is built with headless UI. Then into this overlay into the model. And yes, I have prepared an overlay to display the word searching while the form is processing, to not let people who have a slow network in the void. So we have this overlay in a state, and here we open it. Then we have a search result route, and it gets the URL from the query from the URL, and filter the results and display them. So, okay, let's dive a bit deeper. So here we have our search form, okay? And so if I read here, it says it behaves like a normal form, except that the interaction with the server is with fetch instead of a new document request. And so that's why it doesn't, the page doesn't reload after a submission. But do you remember how normal forms behave? Okay, I don't have you in front of me, but when I give this talk, each time, almost nobody remember. And I will not blame you because I didn't remember myself. And I'm going to show you why. So here, how I'm doing it, I have a method post. And so when there is a post method, I need an action to process this form. And so I write my action in the parent root, which is the root file. So here I have my action, and in this action, I get my form data from the request, and I redirect with this utility redirect to the search result root, and I attach my query to my URL. So that's what we have seen. When we search, we can see this query in the URL. And okay, and then I realize I'm doing wrong because I'm overcomplicating things, because a normal form by default has a get method, and with this get method it will attach the query to the URL, and all what I need is here an action to indicate where to process the form. So this is in the search results root. Okay. And so now I can comment this action and show you that this is working. So basically I was doing this manually while the normal form is doing it. It's useful to use a post method if you have confidential data like a password and you don't want to show it in the URL. But here we can totally keep the get method and use the natural power of our form instead of doing all that manually. So let's verify that all that is working. So I return here. Okay, I open here, I type my query, and we're good. So you see, I was overcomplicating with my form. Okay, let's continue. So, okay, I have my form working, and then here I use this open overlay to open when the navigation. Okay, here we have, sorry, the use navigation hook. So we instantiate navigation here, and this navigation as a state. This state can be submitting, idle, or loading. So when our navigation state is not idle, it means that our form is submitting, so we want to open this overlay, otherwise we want to close it. And when the navigation state is loading, we want to open our model. So let's see it in action here. And we are going to simulate a slow network. Okay, it's already done. And so I go to the console, and now let's see, I open my my form here, and you see that my navigation stated here. So we don't have the overlay with searching that display. I type my query, I enter, and now you see we are loading and we are this searching displaying. But here we have a problem, because as you can see, my overlay stays displaying, but the search is already done and it's not closing because here is not going back to idle. So I'm doing something wrong. Well, I was doing something wrong, and I was making it work. I give this talk for first time in Salt Lake City Creator Rally this summer, and I knew something was wrong. And fortunately, I crossed Ryan Florence, the creator of Remix, that explained me that I was again overcomplicating things because of my React instinct. So let me show you what I was doing wrong and what is right. So let's go back to the right code now. Let me show what is not necessary. In reality here, we don't need to put this overlay in state, because here we are duplicating the state instead of derivating it, because we have the navigation state. So, okay, now let's go to the right code. Okay, so here in my index, I have my use navigation. Again, I initiated here, and I create this constant is searching. So if my navigation state is not idle and that my navigation location path name is search result, then it's searching. So I want to open my overlay. And that's all that we need. So here I just have my search form. Yes, and also here I just have the use effect. If it's not searching, to open, to close my overlay. And here I just have my form, and that's all. So because of this React instinct, we want to put everything in state, and here we don't need that. So the proof is I wanted to show you how simple it is, and I was still complicated things with making by hand what the form is doing by itself, and by creating duplicating state, etc. So let's check now if it works. Okay, so now, okay, we type our query, and okay, state idle, state loading, and state idle again. Everything works now. Okay, so now we are here and we have our query in the URL. So let's go back to the slides. Okay, so this is what we have seen here. We've used navigation. So now we want to get the story, and the stories are the pages and post, all the units of content in story block. We call them stories. So we want to get them and then filter them with the query. So our form is passing the query to the results page. So now we need to use it to filter them. And first we need to get the query from the URL, and to get all the story, or the post and page with the story block content delivery API, which is the REST API of story block. So first, let's see how we extract the query from the URL. Here we use the URL constructor to create an object that represents the URL defined by the parameters. And again, the URL constructor is a web standard. Then this object includes a search param property, which provides utility methods to work with the query string of the URL. So here we get our query. Then we need to fetch all our stories, and for that we use the get story block API from the React SDK from story block. And here, so we return all the story, all the pages and blog posts, but for the moment they are not filtered by the query. So now we are going to use the filter query parameter to filter the story by a specific attribute. So we are going to use the like operation to check if the custom attribute has a value that is similar to our query. So as we want to search in the pages, we search in the body field, and we have these two asterisks because we want all the fields that contain the query. And for the post, we want to search within the headline and within the text field. And by default, the filter we apply are connected by the AND operator, but in this case, we want to use the OR operator. So for that, we use the -- OR keyword. So here is all the code in our loader. So all that is in the search result route. So we have the loader that gets the data from the server. And so we place our filter query in our request. And then we just, we need to retrieve this story. So the filtered story. So here, okay, here. Now that the filter query is here, now all the stories are filtered by the query. And now we retrieve them in the UI with the hook use loader data. And then we filter them by pages or post. Okay, so page results and post results. And then we have all the data to build our page. And voila, we have everything. So as you can see, it's really much more simple than with the usual method with red context, etc. So I hope you like it. And Next, wrapping up, we've seen how using web standards in Remix make building a global search a breeze. But it's not just about making our lives as developer easier, but also about delivering a top-notch user experience. With server-side filtering, HTTP caching, and all this good stuff, we are making our app faster and more efficient. JavaScript is here to enhance the user experience. And the best part, we're doing all this while sticking to web standards, ensuring our app is robust and future-proof. It's a win-win situation for both developers and users. So I hope you like Remix and that you are excited to try it. If you are not already doing it. And at Storyblock, we are organizing a raffle every month, and there you can win 1 year subscription to Egghead. So you just have to scan this QR code and fill out the form by December 31. And so every month we randomly select the lucky winner. Okay, so thank you. And you can scan this QR code and get all the slides. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you, Alexandra. I really love this talk. Well, server-side is a thing now. I mean, server-side rendering, sorry, is a thing now, and we definitely have to pay attention to this modern trend on full-stack frameworks. Thanks for this talk, and looks like my sound is good enough. And yeah, now it's a time for a Q&A session, and I see Zach on my backstage. I'm going to invite him right now, and we're waiting for Alexandra. Yeah, hello. How are
Hey.
you, man?
Hey, Ed. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
That's an honor, a pleasure for us. Thank you for this presentation. I feel like you're a very experienced instructor and kind of, I don't know, coach or mentor for developers. Do you have kind of some additional experience with, teaching people how to code besides, I mean, your course, or how did you end up here?
It's really been just through the courses that I've kind of developed, the teaching skill, but it's kind of something that I've always, I think, been good at. And I think that's part of what also makes me a good programmer, is knowing how to break really complex topics down into smaller pieces. And I think from a teaching standpoint, one of my strengths is being able to identify, like, okay, here's what you need to learn and here's where you are right now. So what are the steps that you need to actually get to really understanding it, instead of just giving you, all the information at once. And now you're like, okay, I don't really know how to connect, the pieces. So I feel like I, can help people, get along the way.
That's cool, and I feel like you having pleasure while doing this, and it's a kind of your thing. Thank you very much. While we're waiting for Alexandra, I think we should just start with our questions, because we have plenty of questions too. I mean, I didn't expect for that much, actually. So let us start. Let's get started, right? And first one. Yeah, this is an interesting one, right?
Yeah, it's a good
Do
question.
beginners use Material UI in the React application, or is it more for an experienced developer?
That's a great question. I think that Material UI is perfect for developers of any level. I think that it's great for beginners, because it gives you all the kind of building blocks that you need to start building applications, which can be even more helpful when you're a beginner versus when you are more experienced. sometimes the more experienced people tend to have a tendency to want to just build everything themselves and like, oh, I know how to do this. I'll just, start going and doing it. But when you are a beginner, sometimes it can help like, okay, here's a button component, here's a slider, here's all this stuff that is kind of already there for you, which makes it, I think, easier to start building applications, especially on your own. So I think that it's great for beginners.
Absolutely, I feel that too. Thank you. And let's move to the next one. Not so beginner's question, I guess. How do you typically structure your components when using material UI regarding maintainability and performance?
That's a good question. I think a lot of the components, they do a pretty good job already of being optimized for performance under the hood, especially the MUI-X components like the data grid that's built especially for high performance and built for data intensive applications. So I think the biggest thing with that is just making sure that you're not, I guess, overusing state and trying to I don't know, in the data grid specifically, it's a memoized component, and so all the props that you pass to the data grid need to make sure that they're also memoized so that the data grid isn't re-rendering constantly, especially when you have lots of data. Like if you have a large number of rows, like hundreds of thousands of rows, the data grid can handle. And so in that situation, you want to make sure to have the props that are only changing when they're supposed to change. But besides that, I think that it's really not that different structuring your components for Material UI versus any other components. I think you just make sure you break everything down. Don't put 5,000 lines of code in one component, and then you should be good.
And you should be good. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that was not that easy question, right? And the next one, we're moving real fast because I have like lots of questions. I didn't expect for that much again. And next one is, are there any tips for integrating Material UI into existing React project?
Yeah, that's a great question. Any tips? I would say that for integrating Material UI into an existing project, the first thing to do would be to really focus on creating your custom theme. Go through your application and look for all the different like typography styles that you're using, all the different colors that you're using, and kind of extract all of that out and put that into your theme. And then when you have that all in the theme right from the get-go, that makes it way easier when you are introducing the Material UI components because they're already going to have those existing styles tied in from the theme. So my tip would be start by building out your theme.
All right. Yeah, start from building up your theme. Thank you. And we're moving to the next question. That's interesting. It's not beginners definitely asking this. Are there any performance consideration to keep in mind when you're using Material UI in a large React project?
Yeah, that is a good question. Like I was kind of saying before, a lot of the Material UI components are pretty well like optimized for performance, like internally. I think that some of the performance considerations can be when you're using a lot of heavy custom styles. There's some considerations around making sure that your styles get injected in the correct order. And that those aren't like, I guess, causing conflicts. And when you're in a really large project, you may have, different, I guess, approaches for styling, especially if you're doing a lot of like global styles. And so I think that just kind of knowing what you're doing with that and making sure that the styles all get put in the right place, in the right order, that I think would be the biggest performance consideration is just heavy customization.
Cool, thank you. And the next question is kind of the same. I feel like some architects facing this library, and they have these questions here today. And it's great. It's a place to answer these questions. Kind of about like the same, but from another angle. Is MUI enough maintained and supported by developer team to be considered reliable for larger scale projects where long-term scalability is crucial? So it's about architecture.
That's a great question. And I can't say enough about how good I think the development team for MUI actually is. It's extremely well maintained and is very actively developed. The team is extremely active on GitHub and are constantly developing and interacting with people. They're really good at responding to issues that are raised on the GitHub, and just in general, the company is growing very quickly, and they're investing a lot of resources into attracting new engineers and new people for documentation, for accessibility, for performance. If you go to their careers page, they're constantly bringing on more people. And over the last few years, since I started using Material UI in 2019, it's grown exponentially since then, and the trajectory is only continuing. And on their landing page, they show that even for like MUI-X, their kind of advanced components are being used internally by NASA, by Boeing, by Apple, by some like really large companies are using Material UI. So if those companies can use it, I'm sure yours can too.
All right. If airplanes are driven by this, Material UI components, you can be sure, no doubt, your website will survive. All right. Thank you very much. I really love this deep, deep conversation here. Thank you. The last question, actually, and I'm sure you will like it much.
Oh, link to my courses. Yeah, great. So the new course, Mastering MUI, is actually still in development. It's on the way. It'll be coming out in 2024. But I will be putting that on Udemy. And I currently have courses on Udemy. I can go ahead and I'll drop the link for that in the chat, so you guys can check that out.
In chat, feel free. Yeah, because it's something we're really interested in. Yeah, and one more question came up while we were discussing this, and maybe we inspired someone to ask. Here it is. Would it be feasible to customize or override UI components and design in special cases?
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of my favorite things about Material UI, especially compared to other UI libraries. It can be sometimes one of the biggest challenges when using a component library is overriding the defaults. And a lot of times you feel kind of stuck of like, oh, I have this component, but I want to make these small changes, but there's no real easy way to do that. That is one of the central concepts that Material UI is built around, is making it easy for you to customize the components at every level. So you can do heavy customization, and they make it super easy to do that. Even when you have large components that are built up of many different smaller components, they give you the ability to pass different props down through each level of the components to override the styles at any level. So it's very customizable. You're not stuck with the default styles. So yeah, that's a great thing that you can do.
All right, thank you for answer, and thank you for this question. Also, well, unfortunately, we don't have Alexandra with us, so probably our Q&A session is over for now. I'm not sure. I'll ask if there's a break for now, or we'll jump into the next part of this. Yeah, it's break, like 10 minutes or something, and we'll get back. Zachary, thank you very much for this presentation, answers, for joining us here, and thank you for your energy and your excitement. Aaron, have a nice day and come back again. We're so happy to have you here.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate it. Love to be back anytime. See ya.
See ya. And now I would love to invite Marcus. I'm not sure if he is ready. If not, he will be moderating the next next block. But anyway, while we have probably not ready yet. While we have this break, take some time to connect these beautiful speakers here, and because these guys are definitely worth to follow on socials. That's what actually I do every conference, because I'm not the community manager who communicates with speakers about this, all these event logistics questions, but while this event, I always connect people. I always saying hi. This is Ed from Geekle or whatever. And feel free to connect me to find me, and I'll drop my link also in this chat. Also, we're waiting for Zach's Udemy or whatever he has for us. And let's take a break and get back to next session with. It will be about the accessibility. I love it. I really love it. It's a thing now, actually. All right, I'm getting off and wishing you the great presentations after me. See you.
Hello, my name is Agustina, and today we're going to talk about accessibility solutions. A bit about me, I'm from Uruguay and I work as a tech lead at a company called Rootstrap. I've been working with React and React Native for the past 6 years and with accessibility, which is the topic of the day, for the past 3. I've had the chance to work with accessibility in multiple projects, from web to mobile, and also implementing accessibility from scratch and retrofitting accessibility into existing projects. The agenda for today. First, we're going to do a brief introduction into what digital accessibility is. Then we're going to do a deep dive into this accessibility case study, where we will take a look at the problem and then 3 possible solutions. And last but not least, some conclusions about the case study and accessibility in general. So let's start with the intro. What is digital accessibility? Well, digital accessibility basically means inclusivity. It means that everyone, no matter which type of disability they may have, they should be able to access and interact the digital medium. It is often said that people with disabilities are a minority, and which is used as an excuse to not take it into account when developing digital products. But if we take a look at the number, we can see that that is just a myth. About 15% of the population has some sort of disability, and if we take into account that we are almost 8 billion people in the world, that is a lot of people. In contrast, almost all web pages have some sort of accessibility issue. So there is a big gap between what people with disabilities need and what is currently available for them. Now, let's do a recap of the different types of disabilities. First, we'll start with the physical one. There are some types of physical disabilities that require users to use special assistive technologies to interact with their computer or phone. For example, this could be just using their keyboard and not their mouse, or other type of devices like zip and puff. Do you usually use your keyboard, for example, when interacting with the web? Do you take it into account when programming? Do you test for it? Well, if you are not currently doing, you really should, because here are some of the common mistakes that you would be missing. We have links that are not focusable and buttons as well. I also have seen that with just one line of code, the focus ring of these elements can be removed, and that could be really damaging. Also really common, you open a modal and then you're stuck because the focus didn't move from the background of the page to the modal and you just can't close it. And a really common one at the moment is implementing infinite scroll, but this doesn't really work well with keyboards because you try to reach, for example, a footer that's at the bottom or a sidebar to the right, and you just can't reach it because as you continue tabbing, just new elements load. Then we have the disability of speech, and this type of disability is usually the usual barrier that people with this type of disability encounter is services that don't have any other way of contact than just the phone. Fortunately, this is happening less and less. Services usually have like a phone number, but that you can contact through WhatsApp, for example, or provide an email or a chat in their web. So yeah, we are really fixing this one. Then we have auditory. What kinds of auditory content do you usually find in the web? What alternatives can we provide? Well, the common mistakes here, we start with the same one. If we only can contact the service by phone, then that is a problem. But we also have videos without closed captions, fortunately, not this one that you're currently watching, and podcasts without transcripts. If we go to the cognitive type of disability, here we need to make sure that the content on the web or on the application is as easy to understand as possible, and that we are not putting distractions for the user. So the common mistakes here would be large blocks of text that are hard to understand, putting placeholders as labels that when you start typing on the input, then the placeholder goes away, and you need to remember, oh, what was this input about? In a really small form, maybe this doesn't affect you as much, but imagine you're filling a really large application form and you need to make sure that the information that you're putting is correct. Then for the distractions that I was talking about, we have animations. If you have animations that are longer than 5 seconds, then you should have a way to pause them. And flashing lights affect people that have things like epilepsy. Last but not least, we have the vision type of disability that actually encompasses a lot of types of disabilities. So what kind of barriers would this disability encounter? Well, we have incorrect page hierarchy that this usually affects people that use screen readers. We have buttons and links that could not have enough context. For example, a lot of links that said read more or buy, and the user has to go through extra trouble to try to understand the context of that button to know what they're clicking on. Then we have not enough contrast or relying only on color to relay information. This could be, for example, painting the border of an input with red to indicate that it has an error, but that is not enough. We also could put, like, for example, an icon to indicate this as well, to make it more easier. And last but not least, lack of alternative text. This is not only for images, but also for visual cues. If you have, for example, a progress bar that is indicating the user how far they have watched in a video, you should also have a way to indicate that to them to screen reader users. Okay, so we have talked about the permanent type of disabilities, but I also want to introduce the concept of limitations and impairments. We have, for example, temporary impairments that could be I broke my arm and I can't use the mouse for a couple of weeks, and I just have to use the keyboard to interact with my computer. Or if we want to give an example for situational limitations, it could be that I'm trying to read something on my phone and I'm outside, and the glare on the screen is so much that if there is not enough contrast on the web page, then I just can't read it. Or it also could be that I'm on the bus and I forgot my headphones and I want to watch a video. If it doesn't have subtitles then or closed captions, then I can't watch it. And if we think about socioeconomic limitations, this could be that I have a really old device that is really slow, or I have really slow internet, and my experience could be really diminished because of this. So if we want to summarize, who does it affect not having an accessible digital space? Well, the TLDR is at everyone. Okay, so we already answered what is digital accessibility and who does it affect, but how do I know if something is accessible? For this, I like to start with the poor principles that say that for something to be accessible, it needs to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. It's really great to get like a general understanding if something is accessible and dip your toes into digital accessibility. But we don't just want that. We want to ensure that things are accessible for our users. And for that, we have standards that are the WCAG rules. They are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that they were created by the W3C, and is what's basically accepted as the rules to follow. We also have the attack rules, which are useful if you're creating a product that allows users to generate their own content. For example, Instagram needs to make sure that they allow users to put an alternative text on the images that they are uploading. These guidelines have a lot of rules and they separate them into different levels of compliance. They go from the super basic rules to the most complex rules. So from level A to level AAA. The current standard is to be compliant with level AA. Just complying with level A is not enough. And these rules all have success and failure cases that allow you to understand better if you are on the right path. Okay, so that was the intro. Now to the case study, and we will start with a problem. The problem that I'm going to show here is not a trivial problem, and is mainly focused on keyboard accessibility. We start with this UI. It has a video player front and center, and then to the side a list of related videos that the user can click through. One particular thing about this video player is that on the progress bar, the video is actually divided into chapters, and it does that with these markers that you can select. The feature in question for the problem is that these markers are actually hoverable. You can hover over them and a tooltip appears, and on that tooltip there is a bookmark button. So you're able to save those chapters to watch later. But the problem is that it just works on hover. It doesn't work with a keyboard. So we are leaving out a lot of users. And this is a problem that we are set out to fix with the 3 possible solutions. So the solution that we will start with is what I call the Alila solution, or the Zachary Reece solution. That is the one that, okay, we already have this feature. How can we make it compliant with the WCAG rules? That is the term that is usually used to say that it is accessible, it complies with the rules. Okay, how can we put the least amount of effort to make it compliant? So we have the same UI as before, but in this case, how do I interact with the keyboard? If I start tabbing now, at some point, I will reach the markers of the progress bar, and these are now focusable with the keyboard. When I focus on one of them, the tooltip that before only appeared on hover also appears on focus. If I tab again, the focus now moves to the bookmark button of the tooltip that appeared. And if I press enter, I can act on that button, and I finally am able to bookmark the chapter. So that's it. It worked. We added a functionality that was not available for keyboard-only users before, and now is. Great, we did it. But here is where the problems start. If I tab again, the focus now moves to the next marker. And if I tab again, it moves to the bookmark button of the tooltip of the next marker. But I just wanted to bookmark chapter number 2. I don't want to bookmark chapter number 3. All these new tab stops that we added, the markers and also the bookmark buttons of the tooltips, are now on the focus order of the page, and we can't really skip them. So it's really tiring for the user to have to go through all of them when they don't actually want to access them for that instance. It also is really intrusive because, for example, imagine that you are watching the video on full screen and you start tabbing because you want to access one of the controls on the control bar at the bottom. Tooltips that keep popping up while you focus on the markers while you're trying to reach something else. So this perhaps is compliant with the WCAG rules. We didn't check too much into it because this is a terrible UX experience. It also happened that this solution, although it appeared quite simple given what we had already, it was actually really hard to implement because of the way this tooltip was implemented. That tooltip is not part of our React code. It's part of our video player code that is in vanilla JavaScript. And the way that it's implemented is just one tooltip for all the markers. And it would have been a nightmare to handle the keyboard focus programmatically from the marker to the button, and then from the button to the next marker, and so on and so forth. So we said, oh, this would take a really long time to implement, actually. Maybe we can think of a better solution that would also take time to implement, but it would be better for the users. And that is how we went back to the drawing board, and here's where we land in the accessibility middle solution. The good solution, but it could be better. And we started to think about the solution in this way. What well-known site has a similar feature? And this is a question that I usually ask myself when I'm trying to solve a bit more complex accessibility issues. It doesn't mean that these well-known pages will always be 100% accessible, because they are not, but because they have really large user bases, it's much more likely that they will have had to think about accessibility and implement it. So in this case, for this particular feature, the site that has the same or very similar feature is YouTube. I don't know if you know this feature of YouTube, but on their videos, they also separate sometimes their videos in chapters, and you can hover over the progress bar to see the name of the chapter and go to one in particular. But also they have this button in the controls. In this case, for example, it says intro for the name of the current chapter, and it indicates that when you click it, something will happen. So in this case, when we activate it, either with a mouse or with a keyboard, this widget on the sidebar appears. On this widget, they list all the chapters. They show you like the timestamp where it starts. You can also go directly to one of them or share it. So this is great. It's accessible with a keyboard. But one thing that it does not work with is full screen. And we wanted ours to work that way. So taking a look at this, we said, oh, we have a similar feature to this that works both on the sidebar when you're not on full screen, and on full screen we show a widget on the top right corner. So say, maybe we can reuse that. And that's what we tried. So if we go to the next slide, we have a very similar interface to before. The only change is that there's a new button. If we try to navigate with a keyboard, at some point we will reach this new button on the controls that is like a list icon. And when you reach it and you activate it, then when you're not in full screen, this widget on the sidebar will appear. It lists all the chapters, and you can bookmark them, you can close the widget, and all of that. What about full screen? We said we wanted it to work on full screen as well. Well, similar to that, you start tabbing, at some point you reach that button, and when you activate it, this widget appears on the top right corner. You can tab through the bookmark buttons, you can bookmark them as well, and when you reach the last chapter and you tab again, the focus moves to the progress bar, and you tab again to the play button, you tab again, you just reach the button where you started at. This adds unnecessary extra tabs, which is not ideal. It's also not the end of the world, but there was also some issues with rendering with React of how this was working, so it was not ideal. But we discovered a much bigger issue, and that is it does not work well with magnifiers. What are magnifiers? They are a type of assistive technology that allow you to enlarge a part of the screen to be able to interact with the elements. If you have really low vision, sometimes users prefer that instead of using screen readers that they read you what's on screen out loud and all of that. If you still have some vision remaining, you might prefer to use this. So in this case, when they interact with a new button that we added, it appears as nothing happens. Why? Because the widget that is being opened is not on the field of view of the magnifier. So it just becomes like a UX guessing game for the user of, oh, did something happen? Did it didn't happen? Not a good experience. So it improved a lot, the solution, especially for keyboard-only users, but the experience still could be better. We could be more inclusive to other types of users. And that way is how we landed on the first solution, which is the final implementation that we did. This is the solution that really puts accessibility at the forefront of the solution. This solution started with the following question. What if we discard a widget and make it a control bar menu? And to be honest, after all the steps that we had gone through, this seemed like the obvious choice. But we hadn't thought of it before because we were trying to avoid at all costs to make changes to the video player. That video player is not in React, that is the main language that we use on this project. And making changes to it, adding any custom type of UI is really difficult. So just adding the simple button to the control bar menu was hard. Imagine adding a whole menu. But if it was the best UX possible, then we had to figure out a way to do it. And we did. So in this case, we went with this solution. Same UI, same new button on the control bar, and at some point when you start tabbing, you will reach it with the keyboard. Now, when you activate it, instead of that widget on the sidebar or on full screen on the top right corner, this context menu appears. And the focus moves right to the first bookmark button. We don't need a close button here because when you press escape, then it closes. And if you open it back up again and start tabbing and reach the last chapter bookmark button, when you tab again, the focus moves to the next control button. And this is actually what happens for all the other control buttons. So it's really good that the UI of the new menu matches that of the other control menus. So yeah, we did it. We finally make it work. And this solution also works on full screen, and we don't need to maintain as very similar widgets on the sidebar and on full screen. And it also works with the magnifier. This new context menu that we added appears near the button that activates it. So the context menu is in the field of view of the magnifier. If you're curious about how we ended up implementing this, because as I mentioned, that part of the code is really hard to change, we ended up using React portals. The way that we did it is that on the vanilla JavaScript code, we just added a div. And then from the React code, we created this entire component where we had access to the props, to all the context, to all the information. And then we just inserted this new component through the React portal in the control bar. We finally arrived to a solution that we are happy with and that it provides a reasonable experience for all users. Yay! So now some conclusions about this. Okay, so the first thing that I want to mention is that accessibility actually matters on every step. This conference is mostly for developers, but this is something that goes to product, design, development, and QA. With this case study, we saw that if an issue starts like really at the top of the development process, you end up having to do a lot of rework. We had to rethink the feature, we have to redesign it, re-implement it, and also retest it. So imagine having a lot of issues like this. It ends up adding up quickly. In the short term, I have seen that just with a bit of accessibility knowledge, implementing things the right way from the start takes absolutely the same time than implementing them wrong. We just implement them wrong because we don't have the knowledge. And in the long term, well, having accessibility knowledge just ends up saving you time because you avoid most of the rework. Here are some other benefits of having an accessible product. First of all, you end up reaching more users, which is really important if you're trying to grow your business. Then you have better SEO. This happens because of the better HTML hierarchy that makes it easier for search engines to read your site. You also have better user retention because the users that find you don't leave because they can't use your product. And if you have an accessible product and your competitors don't, then that's an advantage for you. And last but probably the most cited benefit is that you avoid getting sued over accessibility. I won't go into details about that, but on the presentation you have a link there that you can follow to learn more about it. Okay, so here are some quick takeaways that I want to give. When you have an existing feature and you want to implement accessibility into it, the easiest solution is not always the best solution. I want to advocate for your users, especially if you are on a team that is just starting to implement accessibility. It's super important for everyone in the team to be vigilant about the things that are being implemented. It doesn't matter if you're a developer, if you're a QA, we are all in this together. And the last thing is that we didn't get it right from the start, but we also did learn a lot throughout the process of getting to this solution that we were happy with. And those learnings will stay with us for future implementations. So I really hope that this was useful to you, and thank you so much for listening. Now let's go to the Q&A.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining me today. Today we'll see how to build a React application with Qwik. And my name is Deepa. I am the founder of Weba. And Weba is an IT consultant services company. And I'm also a Google developer expert in web technologies. Currently also an organizer at GDG San Jose, and I'm also an ambassador at Women Tech Makers too. Fun fact about me is I love coffee, and here's a QR code that will lead to all my handles, and every top right would also have my LinkedIn handle too. So today I'm starting off with an assumption that you know something about web development. You know what is JSX template. You know how to build an application in React, or you have built an application with Next.js or something like that. And you should know client side and what is client side and server side rendering, and how it is related to performance and core web vitals too. So I'm making some assumptions here, as you know already these. We'll talk about, the agenda is we'll talk about web today, what is the state of web, and then we'll talk about Qwik, what is it, and what is it, what does it solve, and how does it solve it, and how do we use Qwik with React, how do you create React components in Qwik, and we'll see when and why to use it, and how do you move your React application into Qwik as well. We'll see demos, and we'll wrap it up with a Q&A. So web development today has been more than HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? It needs beautiful design, APIs to serve, data from backend, hosting services, and then domains, search engine optimization, and more, right? So this is the state of web development today. And then we have different frameworks. And as it's evolving and super fast, it has frameworks and libraries And it has state management tools. It has architectures such as micro frontends, Jamstack, and then single page applications as well. And you have web components, server-side rendering tools, and then you have WebAssembly, blockchain, and Web 3.0. And we also have AI and ML getting introduced to web as well, right? So just to give you a picture of how it all started, we had the web development in the past was slow. The rendering was by server side, and interactivity, we used something called jQuery. Back in the days, Ruby was popular. Ruby, PHP, and .NET. These technologies still do exist, but these are the tools that are used in the past. So popular web frameworks today, as we have so many of them, new ones are always coming up. You have Angular, Next.js, you have Spring Boot, and then you also have React at the top, which is about 40%, right? So these modern frameworks we have they use something called as component model, and we have great developer experience. It can also scale with complexity. However, having said all of these things, there's a lot of duplication of JavaScript. What do I mean by this, right? So just to give you a understanding of how it's related to performance, we measure the performance today with these core web vitals. Google uses something called as, if you see Chrome, if you run the audit on your pages, you would see how it measures for largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift, etc., for loading, interactivity, and visual stability. And they also give you ranges as, hey, if it takes less than 2.5 seconds, then your page is good with largest contentful paint, etc., right? So the performance of applications are measured using these. Still, we do have popular framework. We have, we say that these are modern frameworks, but still our websites are slow. And because it's slow, it will it'll deter from visitors, costing millions of dollars. And we do know that to have, if we have faster websites and better SEOs and UX, obviously your business is going to become more profitable, right? So, okay, we talk about the performance. We say that our websites are still slow, right? What's happening here? Why is this all sluggishness happening in our applications, right? So the main reasons, let's see what's the culprit and what's the root cause of, making our applications slow, right? So our applications are slow because for these two reasons, client-side rendering and server-side rendering. Just to give you visuals of client-side rendering is, if you have, here's a request that comes to a user, the server responds with a response, and the JavaScript gets downloaded. You see a loaded screen on the client side, and then once it gets downloaded, it gets executed. Here, for example, it's React code, still keeps loading, and the user still is not able to see the page, right? And finally, when it gets all downloaded and executed, the page is visible. So if all these steps have to happen within 2.5 seconds, which most sites don't. So this is called as hydration, right? And then if we take server-side rendering, yes, same thing, user requests something, and then we already serve them with a static page. So something is visible to the user. However, still, the React code has to get executed. And then here also to make the page interactive, finally, it does take time. And then this is also hydration. We're basically rendering twice. So we just serve them with a static site. And then on top of it, add interactivity. Finally, we are still downloading JavaScript twice here, right? So that's the issue that's happening or causing the sites to be slow. So if you see every React project, just to give you a visual, every React project has a app component, which is a root component. Here's a component tree. Imagine if you have to click one of the buttons or links. You have to download this twice, or if you have to move from one component to other component, and all those things. We need to make sure that we maintain the states and our DOM. That's where virtual DOM comes into play as well. We'll handle all these states too, right? So we're downloading twice JavaScript. That's a whole issue here. And then people do say that, hey, we have improved our web performance, by these many percentage. And then if you read a news, yes, Rakuten made an investment, and then their revenue per user increased and the conversion rate increased. So did Vodafone, but the largest content for Paint, and because of they made the improvement on the page, their sales increased by 8%, and so did other. We read about all these news. However, these are improvements mainly made based on, you could optimize the images, or you could do something with lazy loading, some caching strategy, and server-side rendering. But still, the problem stays the same. We still keep downloading JavaScript twice. So the current frameworks works in big O of n. It's in linear time. So we want something in constant time, right? So are there any options available? So we want our future application we need something with zero hydration, faster, and there should be no duplication or no, twice. We are not rendering it twice. So are there tools around in the market? Yes, there are. I picked up 3 of them. One is Qwik, the other one is Marco, and the other one is Astro. We'll be talking about Qwik today. So what is Qwik? Qwik was created by Misko. If anybody knows, Misko was in the Angular team. He created the Angular JS 1, and then he worked in Angular team for more than 15 years or so. And then here is Misko. He created a new full stack framework. So Qwik is a full stack framework. And then it is, if you look up Qwik, Misko started his own company called Builder.io. And then currently there's less than 1% of people that uses Qwik. However, there's a stable version already available. You can download and start working right away with it. So the issue here was we were duplicating a lot of JavaScript here. So we are trying to remove the hydration, and hopefully if this thing works, it doesn't stop. Come on. Okay, now we are trying to, when the user sends a request, and what happens is Qwik serializes the states. It serializes the event handlers, and it basically chops off the JavaScript into smaller chunk, right? And because of that, the page becomes interactive and available right away. So it works on the principle called resumability. Resumability in Qwik is the ability to pause your execution on the server and resume execution on the client without having to replay and download all the application logic. So it uses something called as, I'm not going to go deep into it. How does Qwik does it? It uses something called as speculative module fetching for immediate interactivity. So just to give you a visual, so what happens is, like I said, it displays the HTML for the first paint, and it uses something called as serialization, and serialized listeners and then internal data structures and the application state into HTML during the whole browser handoff. So it would also parse the HTML and, it displays the HTML, and then it also parses JSON to resume the state. I'll show you how, how does it, I'll show you in the page as how the page becomes interactive in a moment. Just to give you basic comparison, why do we have to use resumability over hydration? Hydration is expensive, and it requires a lot of downloading to make the page interactive. There's code duplication, and of course, it is partial hydration is possible, but it's difficult to do it with all the frameworks that are currently in the market, such as Angular. Take anything, Angular, React, Vue, or Svelte, whatever. And then presumability, on the other hand, all these tools that I talked about, Marco, Astro, they all achieve in different ways. And they cost less, they are less expensive. You do not know interactivity is immediate, and there's no code duplication, and partial hydration is easy. We'll see it when we talk about Qwik and React. So these are some of the features I've been talking about: resumability and serialization. Because of this, we are going to improve performance due to delay in execution of JavaScript as much as possible. We are not downloading so much. And then progressive is about downloading code according to the application needs, and it also works under the principle of lazy execution too. So how do you create a React app? You would use this command to use npm yarn, create quick start. And when you do that, you would see the project folder very similar to React. You would have a root.tsx. Oh, by the way, Qwik supports both JavaScript and TypeScript. So you can use the entry point would be your root.tsx, and here you would see components, and then you would also see some routes. Let's see if we can get this demo. So here is, once I ran this command, I got this beautiful, on localhost. If you see, once a page load, you have a lot of stuff that's going on here. Let's clear this for now. Okay, let's clear this for now. And then watch out when I'm just clicking time to celebrate, right? If I click this, you see the interactivity was there, and then there's only one file, the confetti file. If you click onto this, and if you see the response, this is what is happening, and it will just download only this file, right? And the same thing with if I go clear this one off again and then click onto this, only this particular JavaScript is getting loaded here. If you see, there's some gauge.component, and there's one here, there's two here, there's only at that time it's getting loaded, right? And also there are a couple more examples. You can also create routes. I said full stack, it's a full stack framework. If you click on this, you see here, it's a demo. This is the route that it has. Let's clear this again. And note that when I click on this, all these JavaScript file loads, and it did not, even before I moved this slider, it was already interactive too, right? So let me go ahead and also show you the inspect the element here. So this is what I wanted to talk about. We talked about the, let me see if I can, okay. So note that there is Qwik here. The Qwik here means it's a Qwik component. And also it has something called as JSON, Qwik/JSON, which is the one that serializes. I'll just talk about it in a moment. And also I said that Qwik does it based, it can chop off into smaller JavaScript files, right? Here, if we go and see, inspect this particular button here, the incremental button. I don't know whether you can see it. If you take a closer look at this here, it says button class, and then it says on click. And then it also says at the end here, you have the source, counter, component, and it says .js. So note that everything will have a .js. Even if I inspect this guy here, it will also have a JavaScript. So understand that these are different ways that it chops it off. So this is what we talked about. And then, so here I showed about the Qwik, the script tag, right? The script tag, which contained Qwik/JSON. It's a, this tag in Qwik app is used to serialize the state of application into a JavaScript object. So the JavaScript object can then be used to rehydrate the application when the user navigates to a new page or reloads the page. So serialization is done at the component and at the framework level so that it does not need to download more JavaScript. For example, if you take Next.js, it does not update the framework. It does only the component, right? Whereas Qwik does both component and framework level updates. So yeah, deserializes. And then I did show you something with Qwik when we inspected the page. So every time you see the Qwik, there is a component in the DOM, and the framework serializes the information that is needed to the HTML to the page, right? So that's something that you need to understand when you inspect the page. And I'll show you the code in a moment. In Qwik, we use something called as component with a $sign. The $sign here serves as a marker for lazy load boundary. And in Qwik, what happens is it will break your application into small chunks. Like I showed you those JavaScript, the increment button as well as the decrement button had those smaller chunks, right? So your app is basically broken into smaller chunk, even then smaller than a component. So it is used for dynamic importing. So here's an example. If you see, this is for the increment and the decrement. It's a counter application. If you see, there is a component with a $sign, and then here we are using useSignal. There's something that Qwik uses, and instead of useState, and if you see all the interactivity here, the on-click of this button, you see this is having a $sign, right? Qwik, basically, whenever it sees a $sign, it'll break it up into smaller chunk. And note that this $sign is not related to jQuery or Svelte or any other framework, right? So this is what I showed in the when we inspected the page. So when we do this, you have the on-click one, and then it'll have the JavaScript files. So I did show the demo already. And then when you run an audit using Lighthouse, the performance is going to be 100 with Qwik, because it uses this resumability as its main theme, right? So what Qwik tries to do is it strives to achieve for a constant time by making it, it focuses on both the content and the marginal size. And because of that, they say that it's quite achievable to get it than other frameworks. So when you try to build a Qwik application, when you say npm run build, you would see a lot of chunks of JavaScript files. And if you see the bundle size, it'll it'll be less than 1 kilobyte, which makes it easy to download and execute faster. This is the principle, and it uses behind the scenes, it uses something called as optimizer. I'm not going to go into detail about this, but know that there is an optimizer that does all the work for you for this. Now, switching gears, what are some of the integrations available with Qwik? Qwik comes with a Qwik React. It's a plugin. You can use this command called npm run Qwik add, and then you can add any of these integrations. We'll be doing the React one, and you can use anything else. Like it has builder.io also has a CMS service too, and then test framework, authentication, UI library, CSS. You can have as many plugins as possible with your application. Let's switch gears to how do we create React components. What do we already have React components, right? How do we want to move it inside of Qwik? What you do is you just have to say Qwik run, npm run Qwik add React. I'm not going to go through the entire step of it. So when you do that, it's going to install all the dependencies for you. And it also, if you see, it gives you, there are modifications that happens on package.json. And then behind the scenes, Qwik uses for building your application uses something called as byte. So, and then if you look into the components inside your in a project folder, it would have created a React one. And then also in the routes, it would have created a React route too. So we'll just see this in a moment, apart from other dependencies such as React DOM, React, etc. So why should I use Qwik? You might have this question, why should I use this, right? You should use Qwik when you want to use you're hydrating your React application, React Island in Qwik. So basically, you want to make the React component interactive on the client side. To hydrate a React Island in Qwik, you can use a specific function called Qwikify, or the client JSX property, which I'll show you in a moment. So what is Qwikify? Before I go deep into this, I just want to start sharing here and show. Here is the one. So we have React here, and inside React, you have, I just got this project from GitHub. This is not my own. So I just, this is, just understand that this is how it works. Here is a React, I've used Material UI to get the stepper function. And if you see, it uses something called the Qwikify function, right? This is what converts your React application into Qwik. And it uses 2 parameters here. If you just hover over, this is your stepper function. And then it also uses something called as eagerness. So it has this, if you hover over this, hopefully it works. Yeah, there are some options available: load, visible, idle, and hover. So we are using hover here. And if you, let me try to get into this. So here is, we are using the same component. Here we are sending this stepper, whatever we have created here, we are sending it as a prop here, right? So if I run this, probably you'll be able to understand much better. Hopefully this demo works. Okay. There you go. So here is a stepper route that I added. See, and also if I kind of try to show this. Okay, let me clear off everything here, right? But then watch what happens the moment I hover on this stepper See, it all loads everything up here. If you see the material UI, everything is getting loaded from material UI. Understand that you could use material UI and your React. And here you can use Qwikify to convert your React component into inside of React, Qwik, sorry. So what does this Qwikify do, right? It is, I think it allows your React component. It allows you to use React components in Qwik, and this is how you would use it. We saw the stepper function here, and then here we are using this horizontal linear stepper comes from the material UI. And then also the parameter that I talked about was eagerness. This is what will show you the moment we hovered over, the JavaScript started loading, right? That's one thing. We saw the demo, and understand that when you are having React component and you want to move to Qwik, I forgot to show in the on the code snippet at the top, you need to add this this particular JSX import source. This would tell you Qwik compiler to use React as a JSX factory. So without this, Qwik will not be able to identify or it'll give you errors. So then you would use your Qwikify function to wrap the components. You is either using eagerness or you could use client. However, if you use eagerness, you have to use those options like showed you, idle, hover, and etc. And you could also use props to communicate between React components and Qwik. The one that I showed you, the steps, is used as a prop between React and Qwik application, to a React component and Qwik. So when would you use React inside of Qwik, right? When you want your application to be performant, for example, you want as e-commerce, social media, or you want your applications to be smaller, or you are trying to create a React Native one, or you are trying to create a progressive web app, right? And you want to be able to handle concurrent users. When you want speed, developer productivity, and SEO benefits, that's when you would use React components inside of Qwik. So when you do that, again, I want to stress here more. Most of the applications that you run performance score, they would have 80. Even Amazon's would have Amazon.com would have about 60 to 70 only the performance wise if you run the score. But then because it's due to this current framework that are in use, right? So how do you move when you want to migrate? If you're using a React component library, you can convert all the components in the library to Qwik components using this following command, npx Qwikify React component library. Then you can move everything. And if you are using React component, that requires some configuration. You can pass configuration to the Qwikify function as a second argument. So you can use client visible to make it directive to control when a converted React component is hydrated. This can be very useful for improving your performance of your application. So you can also use the eagerness option to control when a converted React component is loaded. So this, again, can be useful for reducing initial load time of your application too. So just to wrap it up, I just wanted to let you know that if you want to be quick, so if you want your applications to be faster, then you can think of Qwik. So to summarize, we talked about what is Qwik. It is a framework. It's a full stack framework that works on the principle of presumability. What it tries to solve is duplication of JavaScript code. And how does it do it is, I told you, I know some of the it deserializes, and then it uses resumability, right? And we used on a very small nutshell, I showed you how to create component, React component in Qwik, and then you use this Qwikify function to convert your React component to Qwik. And if you want to learn more, you could look into the web. If you go to builder.io tutorial page, that gives you a lot of information. Also, it tells you how to use it, how to use. There's also code snippet comparison between React and Qwik, and what are the things that you need to do as well. And that's about it. Thank you so much for your time. And once again, my name is Deepa. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. And here's a QR code for all my handles. Once again, I just give a pause for a second here before I jump into the references. And there's also an amazing talk by Misko. I have it in my references. Just go look at it, and he talks about how you use signals, and then how does the optimizer work, and things like that, and why Qwik is faster, or when would you, for example, if you're using server-side rendering, he gives a lot of examples, visual examples to go through every similar use cases as well. So I think if you have scanned the QR code, here are the references, and I would connect with you in Q&A. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks, Geekle, for having me here. Once again, it's my pleasure to be here at Geekle. Thanks.
As always, Deepa is our beloved speaker, and as always, she's real great. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, Deepa was not able to join us on this Q&A session, but if you have any questions, and I see some questions over here, yeah, but probably it's better to address these questions directly to her. But I hopefully have Agustina with me. So I inviting you here, Agustina. I hope you can join us, because I see you're connected on our backstage, but can't. I'm not sure if you're connected with camera and everything. Oh yeah.
Hello.
How are you?
Great. I was not sure if I was in the correct link, because I didn't see you like on the backstage and I was alone, but yeah, I'm here.
All right. Yeah, finally we're here. Oh yeah. So first of all, thank you for this talk. Actually, accessibility, the thing now. Here at Geekle, we have about 30 conferences per year for different type of developers, Python, Java, React, Angular, you name it, lots of conferences. But almost on every conference, we have speaker who somehow mention or talk about accessibility, and I'm happy this is the logical, normal next step of our civilization.
Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting this topic.
It's a topic that is gaining a lot of traction, and since not many people know about it, the easiest way to introduce the topic to new people is try to get in this type of conferences of web development and all of that are kind of related but are not specific to accessibility, and we get to take this topic to more people.
All right. My first question is my personal one. I always see this A11Y acronym, and could you please explain us how to pronounce it and give us more context?
When I first saw it, I as well didn't know what it was. It's because accessibility, starts with an A, ends with a Y, and it's 11 letters in between. So it's usually pronounced Ali because the ones look like L's. But yeah, it's like an abbreviation of accessibility. I also learned through that internationalization is often written as I18N, and it's because of the same reason, because it has 18 letters in between.
Yeah, because sometimes I hear people read it like Ali or something like that.
Yeah. They usually call it Ali, but yeah, it's
Ali.
A11Y.
So it's correct too.
Yeah.
All right. So our first question is already here. What about Ali and new technologies VR? I think not only VR. Is it possible, and where can we learn about this?
Yeah, I saw this question while I was watching the talk, and it was really interesting. I hadn't thought about it, and I started like googling a bit about it. And there's some links that I found that were interesting. I think that it's possible. There are some types of disabilities that might be more challenging to bring the experience to. But I've also seen, like, for example, not for VR, but for gaming in general, PlayStation has been working really hard on a new type of controller that is more accessible for people with disabilities, like with their hands, like motor skills and all of that. It's very modular and customizable. So like a similar experience could be brought to like different controls for the VR experience for that type of disability. For visual disabilities, it would be a lot harder. Maybe other types of assistive technologies that bring another type of sensory experience that is similar, probably not the same, but we could make an experience that is also enjoyable for them.
All right, thank you for this research, and that was an interesting question actually, and for me because I'm into these AI trends. I scan it.
Yeah. When I saw it, oh, this is really interesting. I actually want to learn about this. I will continue researching afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, people. And the next question, it was also interesting. I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question, but still, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I also saw this. I don't think there is like statistics by countries. I know that, well, one of the things that I mentioned that is like the most discussed topic right now, and why this topic of accessibility in general is gaining so much traction, is because more and more, especially in like first world countries like the US, that is what my company usually like focuses on, the type of client we're like a software factory, so we sell development to them. More and more lawsuits are coming out of it, and so the companies that have that to take that into account because of that, and then there are other companies that are starting to think about the topic because they see like the space in general is like more vulnerable to lawsuits. So I assume that in those countries is beginning to gain more traction than in others. Unfortunately, like that is the reason. But yeah, it's gaining more traction everywhere.
All right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, next question is more kind of architectural, probably, or to you as a tech lead. Here we go. What are the practical steps or strategies for developers to shift from an afterthoughts to making it a regular part of development process? I think it's about, of course, accessibility features. And by the way, it was interesting idea to add these widgets for accessibility. I really loved in your talk.
Yeah, well, I've been in projects where we have thought about accessibility from the start, where we were starting from scratch and it was a requirement already. And I've also been in projects where we had to rush to fix a lot of accessibility issues to make it compliant. So now that I'm in a project that we have already fixed like most of the accessibility issues and we are developing more features, what we're doing is during the development, like when the ideation process before we start developing, well, we ask questions about, oh, how does this feature work and all of that. When we talk to design and product, we also try to make sure that we take accessibility into account and that we solve for it. We have like a possible solution for it. Even if we are just like doing experiments, we do a lot of experiments in what I do. Okay, maybe we don't implement this if it's like a bit more complex solution. Like we make sure that we have a path forward to implement the right solution. Yeah, like try to think about it before rather than after implementing it. And yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit more time, but most of the time it's like, yeah, just use the correct HTML, use the correct button and all of that, and it will be like 80% accessible. The other 20% is like what is a little bit more complex to implement.
All right. Thank you. And the next one, like I could ask the same question actually. How could AI be beneficial in accessibility matters in the future? That's your opinion is needed here. And also, could you please recommend any existing AI solutions for digital well-being?
Well, so far, I think that there have been examples. I don't know if it's like AI per se, but there's a lot of like widgets that you don't have to make your page accessible. You just put a widget in your page, and it kind of tries to make it accessible for you, which like sounded great at the beginning, but when people try to implement it, it ended up generating more issues, and it became an excuse for not doing things the right way from the beginning. Like just put that widget there, it automatically makes it accessible, but it actually doesn't work great. So far the experiences have not been so good with that. I hope that in the future it starts to like be better and better, and maybe there's a future where we can just use a widget like that and it will be accessible. But yeah, I see a long road ahead before that.
That's cool. Thank you. If you will remember something, please feel free to share with our audience in the chat. And I actually got an idea right now. Why don't we, research deeply these accessibility topics and the tools and approaches and combine it in a separate, small, maybe 1-day event for architects, tech leads, and people who in charge before the management for the accessibility to deliver more value and to make actually our online more accessible. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. I think it's really important. There are various aspects. You first have like what you like the learnings that we had from the processes that we had to implement, and what went wrong, what went well, and like how can we iterate on that. And it's also really important if we are like talking like lead or manager level, how to sell accessibility is really important, because if it doesn't come as a requirement from the client, in my type of product that we sell at my company, like at first, like how do you sell it to the client? How do you say, oh, this is important for you? And because like it will take a bit more time, so it will mean a bit more money, but in the long term it would be beneficial for the client. So yeah, like how to sell it to the client is really important also to talk about.
Yeah, how to sell it. Okay, that's nice. I know. All right, the last one, I believe. Yeah, here it is. What challenges developers might face when implementing accessibility first features, and how can this be addressed? Quite common question.
Yeah, there are some challenges. Like mainly, we were just talking about a new feature that it also had the issue of hover, that we were going to implement something with hover, and I was like, oh wait, okay, maybe this is not the best experience for this type of user. So yeah, like trying to think about the experiences that you're building, and maybe if there's like something like hover or video or stuff like that, make sure that you're covering all the types of disabilities. the four principles that I mentioned in the talk for me are like essential to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Like, is what you are building, does it cover those principles? If not, then how can you address it? In some more complex cases, it will take a bit more time figuring out, but in most cases, it's just easy.
All right. Thank you, Agustina, for your experience, for your time, energy, contributed here in this community. Come again. I'm so happy to have you here with us, and have a nice day or evening or whatever you have. And we're moving on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And now we have our second block over, and just to mention, if you don't have access to tomorrow's talks, you can have it with 20% discount on our website. Just visit this link and grab it. And also now we'll have a small break. I believe it's about, wait a second. Yeah, okay. It's about like 10 minutes, and my colleague Paul, 5 minutes. They say in 5 minutes, and here's the guy who's saying how many minutes we have left. Only some fingers minutes. Yeah, hey Paul. Yeah, so the stage is yours. Let's go to this break, and we'll continue with another speaker.
Let's grab a coffee, maybe a sandwich, stretch our backs, and let's talk some practical stuff also. All right, everyone, welcome to our third block, and let's get started with our next presentation. And our next presentation will be from Kat Johnson from Microsoft, and we will be talking about some practical aspects of accessibility. So we will be looking at a topic, how to build accessible React components. So we heard about some principles, and now let's dive into how to actually build those components. This talk will be recorded because I saw some people asking whether some talks are recorded and some talks are live. So some of our talks from our speakers who, let's say, are in LATAM or North America, like Canada and US. For some speakers, it's super early. It's like 6-ish in the morning, and it's not quite convenient for them to join for the live presentation. So they kindly provide us the recording of their presentation, and then they join us live for Q&A sessions. So it's convenient for them, and we're basically getting the top-notch presentation without any problems with a potential internet or whatever. So yeah, and my personal requests, please ask questions. Some of the topics that we will cover, they're going to be super practical. So please ask those questions. And if you don't have a ticket for tomorrow's senior track, and let's ask some questions, because I believe I have 2 or 3 tickets for the giveaway for tomorrow. So yeah, ask those questions, and we will vote internally for the best question, and you will get yourself a ticket for tomorrow. So let's start with Kat's presentation.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning or good evening, wherever you're at. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm really excited to talk to you today about accessibility and specifically how to build accessible React components. So let's get started. All right, before we really dive in, I'm gonna first talk to you a little bit about myself. My name is Kat Johnson. I am a software engineer at Microsoft. I've been working in the industry for a little over 6 years, and I specialize in front-end development and creating accessible web components. In my day-to-day job, whenever I'm working on my website or working on any type of functionality, I always like to incorporate a lot of things I'm passionate about into my workflow. A lot of things I'm really passionate about are anti-racist leadership, really incorporating that into my teams and leadership within those structures, and really creating accessible and inclusive technology. And really, as a whole, I love creating experiences for everyone and creating positive change out in the world with my tools in building websites and technology. For today's talk, I'm really excited to talk to you about one of these areas that I love, which is accessibility. So let's dive in and get started. Before we can really dive in, let's talk a little bit about accessibility. So first and foremost, accessibility really as a term just means the ability to access. Typically, accessibility focuses on enabling access to societal and communal services and tools for people with disabilities. We see accessibility resources and tools and technology all around us. We see them within the closed captioning, within our Netflix shows, to even like the little buttons we see when we enter buildings that are wheelchair accessible doors that open and close upon a button press. All these accessible tools and technology are all around us, and they are there, and they create better and robust experiences. So when I first got into software engineering, I was so excited to build accessibility, build accessible solutions that I can incorporate into websites and any project I worked on. I was so excited, and I was really jazzed to get started. However, once I started digging into accessibility, I encountered a few frustrations. Some of these frustrations centered around the uncertainty of like creating accessible web experiences. I would spend a lot of time focusing and trying to build really good website experiences and features that were accessible, only to build them and then immediately get a bunch of accessibility. And then depending on the project that I'm working on, sometimes there are really tight deadlines, and it really makes it very impossible to build accessibility and experience with a limited time. And depending on whether you work in a big company or a small company, there can be a lack of investment into the area of accessibility, and it can be really hard to advocate for an accessible experience without a whole lot of support from management. But overall, like no matter who you are, I think for the most part, we all want to build accessible websites. We don't go into engineering with the sole intention of creating websites with the purpose of excluding people. We all want to create and build inclusive experiences that everyone can enjoy. The real question is, how do we do this and do it effectively? Well, I am so glad you're here to join me today, because we're going to dive into how to build accessible React components. We're going to be talking about roles, tab stops. It's going to be great. Now, before we start digging in, the one big caveat I want to give to everyone is that if you are using a React component library already within your website, say it's Remix or Flow UI or any other component libraries that exist out there, a lot of them are going to have accessibility baked into that experience already. So you don't really necessarily need to worry about making sure buttons, lists are accessible within your experience. You should still be running accessibility scans and trying to evaluate to make sure it's accessible within your execution, but those component libraries typically should have accessibility baked into the experience. If there are bugs in those React libraries, I encourage you to reach out to those developers, file bugs, and help create more accessible experiences. For this talk and presentation, I really want us to focus on custom React components. For instance, say you're using a component library, but you need something a little bit more specific for your website. You might utilize some things from that component library, but for the most part, you're going to be creating a custom component that'll work just for your website. In those cases, it's really important to understand how to build an accessible React component, or if you own your own component library, it's important to understand how to create accessible components. And it's with that I hope this presentation is the most helpful to you. So without further ado, let's start diving in. First question I want you to ask yourself whenever you're building out a React component is, how will this component be used? Are you going to be creating a list component? Is it going to be a collection of lists and links and list items that are going to have like some site navigation, where it's important to let the user know that everything is part of a list and they are all related together? Or perhaps you're creating a button. Perhaps you're creating a navigation menu at the top of your page, and each button in there is a link to a different section of your website. Once you understand what your experience is going to be for your customer, be it list, button, or another experience entirely, once you've determined what that experience is, you can start to determine what ARIA role you should be applying to your custom component. So let's pause and answer the question, what are ARIA roles? Well, ARIA roles define a semantic meaning, provides a semantic meaning to the content that you're creating. It allows screen readers and other assistive tools to understand what the interaction is and provide helpful hints and resources for users to participate and interact with that component. It also really sets user expectations when they're interacting with the experience. For instance, if they're a screen reader user, knowing that they are cursing or navigating over a button signifies to them that they can hit the enter button and it'll interact with it and change the state of the website. Setting ARIA roles are also really important because it's the first step. Defining the ARIA role is the first step for defining the accessibility expectations for the experience. And it makes it so much easier to fix and find and navigate accessibility bugs in your experience down the line. So when you're creating something really custom, really start with setting the proper ARIA role. So to look back at some of the examples we had earlier on, for the example where we have a list, we're going to set the role to equal list. If you're creating a button, we need to make sure that we're setting that role to a button. Now, with each of these roles, there's a lot of other ARIA attributes and ARIA expectations that a component in HTML needs to have to provide the most accessible experience. You'll need to look that up and navigate and understand how that is for different roles, but this is just here to give you a slice of how to set that role and then be able to expand the accessible experience for your component. Now, there are a lot of other ARIA roles out there beyond just button and list. Here's a small slice of some that I use in my work, in my day-to-day. Link, checkbox, radio, tab, all of these have specific uses and have specific experiences for customers. When you're creating a custom component, I encourage you to read through these ARIA roles, the requirements, the other ARIA attributes that they require, and select the one that matches and most aligns with the experience you're trying to create for your customers. If you want to see any more, you can also look on waiaria.com for more lists of roles and experiences. All right, so we're good with ARIA roles? All right, perfect. So now we're going to segue and talk about labels, and specific labels that we'll want to understand and incorporate into your component experience. So whenever you're creating a component, they'll usually have a visual label into it. So if you're thinking about earlier with our other button examples, a lot of them have visual labels and text that users can see, interact with. For the most part, if you're putting in the text inside of that button, in this example, a normal HTML, you'll have a button tag and you'll have the text inside of it. If it's just straight text, you're usually fine from an accessibility standpoint. But say you have a button where the inside isn't text, it just has 3 stylized lines. Here's an example in my website where I have 3 lines, and visually looking at it, we know that this is a menu button, and that if you click it, it'll pop open a menu. But for screen readers and users using other assistive tools, it might not be as clear that this is a menu button and that you can interact with. If I was navigating with a screen reader and I toggled over this component, I would just hear read out button without any other details about it being a menu. So whenever you're creating and designing a custom React component, please bear in mind and make sure that you're applying an ARIA label when needed. And for this experience, I added ARIA label with menu, so then it adds that into the experience so customers, when they navigate it, they understand that this is a menu button and therefore understand what clicking on it will signify and how it will change the site. So make sure to apply ARIA labels when needed. The other label I want to talk about is alt text attributes. And alt text attributes are specific labels that we apply to images within the website. So if you're creating a React component and you have some images within it, you need to make sure that you're applying the proper alt text so it makes sense for your user experience. That might be exposing a property for allow people to set the alt text, or applying a standard alt text within the experience if the images are always going to be the same. So remember to utilize the alt text appropriately. There's more details on how to stylize or set the alt text depending on the situation. I encourage you to look online for more details on that, or follow me for another presentation because it's really interesting. All right, so that was labels and setting labels within your React component to make them accessible. Now let's talk about tab stops and setting the focus programmatically. Now, who here has tried out tab stops or know what they are? Now, when I first got into the accessibility, I'd never really played with tab stops, and they're really interesting. Tab stops are essentially a way for people using their keyboard can navigate a website page. Tab stops mostly navigate over buttons and links and other interactive pieces of content. And ideally, they should follow the general flow of the page, going from left to right or right to left in other language patterns, and then going down the page. The last thing you want to do is to have the tab stops jump wildly all over the page. It's very jarring for users, and it really doesn't make sense within the page content. Additionally, when you're creating your experience, you only want the focus to be applied to buttons, links, and other interactive pieces of content. Please do not have the focus go over bodies of text or images within your web experience, as it's very unnecessary. Now, let's say you are creating an experience and you created your component, but for some reason the tabbing is not working. You're unable to tab to that component on your page. Well, there's some things we can do to fix that. First thing I recommend you always try if you're having any issues with tab stops is to add tab index equals 0. What tab index equals 0 does is it takes your component and adds it into the tab order of your page. And as long as it's properly placed within the layout of your DOM and follows that general flow of the page, adding tab index equals 0 will add it into the tab order for your page experience. Now, let's say we did that and for some reason it's not working. You added tab index equals 0, it's not working, you can't get to it. What can you do then? Well, thankfully, there is one other method that you can do that can really help get you to tab to that experience. And it's called, you can use it via the React ref. You pass in a React ref into your component, and then you use that ref and say .current, .focus, and it'll apply focus directly to your component. This I would recommend you use sparingly, very carefully, because you can encounter several issues with this experience. You could easily cause the user to force them to focus on a certain area of their page. They could be down here and you force them to snap all the way up here. You could also potentially create some closed focus loops where people can't tab out of an experience on your page. These are really frustrating for customers and really degrade the accessibility experience on a website. So I highly encourage you to use tab index equals 0, and then only if that hasn't worked and you tried various other things and it's still not working, only then try the React ref and the focus, because it can be a little interesting, but it is a tool you can utilize in certain situations. So now let's segue and talk about where your component will be used and specifically what properties you'll want to expose for your component. So let's say you're creating a component that will be used in one location on one area of your website. For this situation, you really don't need to expose a lot of accessible properties for your component. You'll still want to expose like general properties for your component, like say passing in text or some other things for the hooking up within your in your React app experience. But for accessibility reasons, if it's only being used in one place, and as long as you're applying the proper ARIA labels and roles and all that stuff within that component, there's no need to expose any ARIA properties for other people to modify outside of it. But let's say this component isn't going to be used in one location on one website. Let's say instead that it's being used all over your website. It's being used in different areas on your page within different contexts for different purposes and different actions. In that situation, it's really important to at least expose a few accessible properties. This will allow you to fine-tune that experience and modify it depending on what the context is in different areas of the page and for different actions you're wanting the user to complete. So exposing a few accessible properties can be really great here. But let's say that you're building this React component for a component library where your component will be used in many locations over many websites on pages you can't even fathom where they'll be. In this situation, it's really important to expose as many accessible properties as you can to allow other users to fine-tune and modify the experience to work within their own situation. Obviously, do provide a really good default accessible experience that will work in most edge cases or most cases, but allowing users to modify a few ARIA attributes allows people to fine-tune the experience a little bit more. I've actually had a situation within one of my components where we actually had to modify the role property for some reason. Or what I mean more is we had a button component, and because this button was, when a user clicked it, it would send them to another website, we decided to change the role of it to a link. So then users who are navigating the experience using a screen reader will hear that it is a link, and they'll know that it will navigate them to a whole new page. So in small instances, it can be really important to allow users to modify the role. Don't really recommend it in all cases. I would still recommend limiting it to a certain range. But even still, when your component is being used in so many websites and so many locations that you can't expect where it's going to be utilized, it's important to expose as many accessibility properties as you can to allow the fine-tuning of that experience. So that was all we have for talking about React components and making them accessible. Before we wrap up and close off the presentation, I want to talk to you about a few more ways that you can be accessible and create more accessible experiences. First thing I highly recommend is that you get automated accessibility scans. They are very paramount in how I create more accessible experiences within my web development. Here are two accessibility scans that I utilize in my day-to-day life. Accessibility Insights for the Web is a Chrome extension that I use all the time. And it's really helpful for scanning the website and finding any accessibility bugs from a low-level semantic standpoint. There's also Xcore web extensions. I use this extensively. And they also have a lot of options for adding in automated testing into your development pipeline. So then you can test and scan your experiences before they are deployed to customers. And it's really helpful and beneficial for creating a robust, accessible experience for your website. There are a lot more accessibility scans out there. I've also heard of Lighthouse. I encourage you to explore them and find one that really fits for your workflow and then incorporate it into your development. Another thing I highly recommend is user focus sessions. I can't stress enough how important it is to have user sessions with actual customers. While we can use these automated tools and scans and talk to other accessibility experts to do audits of our website, nothing really beats talking to customers and finding gaps in the experience, fine-tuning the execution, and creating better solutions that actual users and actual customers will really enjoy. And finally, if you have time, I encourage you to explore other assistive tools like trying out screen readers, color contrast, and other tools on the market that customers use to interact with your website. I do encourage you to be careful though. Without proper training in how to utilize these tools, you could easily find an issue and think that it's an accessibility bug on your site, but really just turns out you use the screen reader or tool incorrectly. So short of trying out color contrast and other default settings within your website or within your device, for screen reader tools and other assistive tools, please get proper training on how to use them before finding bugs. But it can be really helpful and really enlightening to see how these tools interact with the website and other devices and see how you can incorporate and build better solutions for customers. So as we're wrapping up here today, I hope that some of the nuggets of some of the ideas and some of the points of feedback can be really helpful for creating accessible features in React. And I hope that everything gets a lot easier because accessibility should be easy to implement, and it's up to every one of us to create robust, accessible experiences to make the web space a much more accessible space for everyone. So thank you so much for being here today for my presentation. Here are some resources I used within to build out my slide deck. And if you want to hear more from me and about some of the things I do in my workday, you can reach out to me on catandthemachines.com. I also have a LinkedIn and Twitter that are linked on that website. At some point, I'll be creating a podcast and sharing out more information on accessibility. That will come around once I have time. But if you have any questions for me about accessibility or any things I presented here at this presentation, please reach out to me and I'd love to chat. Thank you so much for coming here today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much to Kate and to everyone who joined us for this presentation. And by the way, thank you for all the questions that you've asked. We already have 3 questions submitted, and we will be choosing from those questions a winner. So please continue asking those questions, and we will continue with our next presentation from our speaker. We will have Tyler Hawkins, Senior Software Engineer for Webflow, and we will be talking about how to navigate the career of software engineer if it was a loser's game. And he will be talking more about this concept and how we can actually adapt and how we can navigate the space. Let's start with Tyler's presentation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Hawkins, and this is Software Engineering is a Loser's Game. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far and super excited to talk to you today and present on this topic. This talk is based on an article that I wrote about 2 years ago that got a good bit of traction in the engineering community, and I've been wanting to speak on it for some time, so I'm excited for the opportunity to do so today. As I said, my name is Tyler. I'm a senior software engineer at Webflow. You can find me on all the usual places online, LinkedIn, Twitter. I also do a fair amount of writing and blogging, so you can find my work on Medium or Dev as well. And all of this info and more is available on my website, tylerhawkins.info. So with that, let's dig in. So software engineering is a loser's game. That's the title of the talk, and it's intentionally a provocative title. Just to clarify a few things, I feel like I have to clarify this topic does not mean software engineering is for losers. It does not mean software engineers are losers. That is not at all what this concept or what this idea means. So with that out of the way, you are all winners. You all are great. Let's learn more about this concept. So your follow-up question, right? So, okay, so what does it mean? What does it mean to say that software engineering is a loser's game? So in order to understand this idea a little better, we need to go back about 50 years. This concept of losers' games versus winners' games was explained and identified by a man named Simon Ramo. He was a scientist and statistician, and he wrote a book called Extraordinary Tennis for the Ordinary Player. And in this book, it's about tennis. He talks about losers' games and winners' games. And in the book, he explains that, or rather he observes that there is a big difference in the way that amateur tennis matches versus professional tennis matches are played and won. So just think for a minute about, kind of the difference in a tennis game that you see if you're watching something professionally on TV and watching how they play compared to maybe yourself or some friends playing tennis near your home. What's the difference between the two games? And one of his biggest observations is that in amateur tennis, he calls it a loser's game. And what he means by that is that points are lost by the loser more than they are won by the winner. And so rather than just thinking about, who won the point, he began looking at why did the person win the point? What happened to cause the point to be won? And so what he found is that in this loser's game, where points are lost by the loser, is that they're often due to these unforced errors that are committed by the loser. So maybe the person double faults on their serve, right? The winner didn't do anything to cause that to happen, but the loser committed an unforced error and double faulted on the serve. Or maybe they missed an easy shot. They were just returning the ball and they hit it out of bounds. Or they tried to go for a smaller portion of the playing field and missed, right, rather than going for a larger portion. Or maybe they just hit the ball into the net. And so again, these are all unforced errors. And so you can think of the point being lost by the loser rather than won by the winner. So that's a loser's game. And so when you're playing a loser's game, especially in tennis, a winning strategy can just be to just keep the ball in play, right? To not try to do any particularly tricky shot, but rather just to return the ball. I'm an avid ping pong player. I work fully remote right now, but back when I worked in an office, I loved to play ping pong. It's a staple of the tech world, and I would play ping pong just about every afternoon. And I would see this play out. If any of you, are in the office or play ping pong or tennis, you'll often see this, that if you are, playing with someone who's fairly new or not very experienced, if you just return the ball simply and just keep the ball in play, over time, eventually they'll commit an error, right? And they'll miss, they'll hit it into the net, they'll hit it off the table. But they'll lose the game by beating themselves, essentially. So again, the winning strategy is just keep the ball in play. In a winner's game, however, it's kind of the opposite strategy. Points are won by the winner more than they are lost by the loser. And so it's not so much these unforced errors anymore committed on behalf of the loser. It's now more due to skill that's demonstrated by the winner, right? And so the winner has a really well-placed shot that's just out of reach of his opponent. Or they are stronger, or they put more spin on the ball, right? But it's due to their skill that they win these points rather than the errors of the loser that are losing those points. So that's the difference between a winner's game and a loser's game, especially in context of sports with something like tennis or ping pong. And so why this application is important is that it's interesting to think about, not just in the context of tennis or ping pong or sports in general, but in life. And so the application that was made is that when thinking about losers' games or winners' games, you can figure out in any type of situation what kind of game you're playing. Is this a winner's game or a loser's game? And then from there, you should adapt your strategy accordingly. So that's the premise. That's the idea of winners' games and losers' games. And so going back to the title of the talk, software engineering is a loser's game. What if we consider software engineering to be a loser's game? What might that look like? And how might that change our strategy in how we play this game? So again, if software engineering is a loser's game, then a winning strategy might be simply to minimize our mistakes. And it's important, I should note, that as we talk about this, it's important not to take the analogy too far. Obviously, the goal of software engineering is not simply to minimize mistakes, because if that were the case, then the best software engineer would be the one who does nothing, right? Because if they do nothing, you cannot make a mistake. But that's obviously not the case, right? The goal of software engineering is we're trying to ship some sort of product or feature or whatever that accomplishes some goal, right? We're trying to make money for the business, or trying to simplify something for our users, or make the world a better place. We have some sort of bigger goal that we're contributing to. So just a little disclaimer, that's not the ultimate goal, is to minimize mistakes. But it is an important strategy in software engineering, is to minimize our mistakes. And so as we think about that, as we think about the goal of minimizing our mistakes, of simply keeping the ball in play, and if software engineering is a loser's game, it's interesting to think about in what ways do we commit unforced errors? In what ways do we essentially beat ourselves and lose in this game? And on the flip side, how can we keep the ball in play rather than hitting it into the net, right? So that's the premise here. And so I've been doing software engineering for about 10 years now. And something that I've come to see, and a piece of advice that I would give, is that you can actually become quite a good software engineer simply by learning from your mistakes, and learning not to make those same mistakes over and over again. As you move, especially as you're newer in the field, as you move from a junior developer to a mid-level to a senior, a lot of times this growth simply comes from learning from your mistakes and learning not to continually make those again. There's a saying you may have heard, it's okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to make the same mistake twice. Twice might be a little strict, maybe it's okay to make the same mistake 3 or 4 times. But the point of that, right, is that if you're making the same mistake repeatedly over and over, that means you're not learning from it, right? You're not learning why it's a mistake or how to overcome the mistake. And you're not growing because of it, right? And so it's important that we learn from our mistakes. And so as we begin to think about that, what are some of these common mistakes or unforced errors that we might commit in software engineering? I brainstormed a short list. This is obviously not an exhaustive list at all. But these are some common mistakes that I see either in myself or in other engineers as I've worked. And so this brief list, I think we've got maybe 6 or 7 or 8 on here. But so the first one, not understanding the problem before trying to code a solution. You ever done that before? You ever jumped into trying to solve something when you didn't quite understand the constraints of the problem, or what you're actually trying to solve in the first place? Maybe you think you understand, a small symptom of it, but you don't actually understand the root cause or the root part of the problem that you're trying to solve. You'll see this oftentimes, especially in interviewing. Every software developer, I think most at least, dislikes live coding. But one of those things that the interviewer often looks for is, did you ask questions to clarify the problem, to clarify the assumptions or constraints before jumping right in and coding? And the reason that we look for that is because it's an important skill, that you figure out that you're actually solving the right problem before just diving right in, only to realize that you've gone far down the wrong path and now have to backtrack. Second common mistake or unforced error that we might commit is not understanding the tools or programming language you use. I've seen this in the past with maybe a developer that's new to, maybe they're early on in their career, and they're learning to write tests for the first time, which is great, which is a great skill to have. And so maybe they're working in JavaScript and they're using Jest, and they're really just fumbling along with not understanding how to make assertions or how to use matchers in Jest or something like that. And so they just fumble along with the code for a very long time, when maybe a better strategy would be perhaps to just take a break for a minute and go watch a video on Jest for an hour or two and learn about the basics and the fundamentals of it, rather than trying to muddle your way through without having that solid foundation in place. So perhaps it's a mistake or an unforced error to just kind of guess or flail about and see what works, rather than taking a step back to learn the tool or the framework or whatever that you're trying to use. Another common mistake would be not carefully reviewing your own code before asking for a code review. There are a lot of things as engineers that we can do to be good stewards of the code and to be helpful when we submit our pull request for others to review. Some really common mistakes, right? You might leave, just some JavaScript console logs in your code that you were using during debugging, and you forgot to get rid of them before you submitted the pull request, or you had commented out some code and you left some random commented out or dead code in the file before asking for a review, right? And so that can be, a simple mistake, is that's going to increase the time that it takes for your code to get merged, because it's going to go through one round of review. The person reviewing the code will hopefully catch those things and say, hey, can you fix these? And then you'll go back. And so you've now basically increased the cycle and the time that it will take for the code to be reviewed. In addition to that, right, if it's a repeated offense or something that happens over and over, you may lose trust with those other engineers around you who are reviewing your code if you start to maybe gain a reputation of not reviewing your code very carefully or being a little sloppy in your work. So a little planning beforehand and just a little self-review before asking for a review from others can go a long way and help make sure that that's not an unforced error that you're committing. Another one on a similar vein might be to not manually test your code before asking for a code review. Maybe the code itself looks fine, but as soon as you spin it up in the browser, something obviously crashes or has a very visible bug, right? The other person reviewing your code, if they've pulled down the code locally, or if that's something you do in your process, will catch that and obviously wonder, well, why did this come through here? How did you not see that earlier? In which case you'll have to sheepishly admit that, well, I didn't run it locally and I didn't actually check. So again, make sure not to make that unforced error. Be more thorough in your own testing and your own code before asking for a code review. Another unforced error might be not writing unit tests. This will very much depend on company culture and engineering culture, but I'm very much a fan of testing. Using unit tests and tests in general is a great way to ensure that your code works and to gain more confidence. Whether or not you're a big TDD fan, I think is up to you. I see pros and cons to both, but having tests is super important. And then another one, not following agreed upon company standards. If there are well-documented processes in place or expectations as far as standards go, trying to submit code or work within that process without actually following those things, and then wondering why maybe it's taking longer to do your work or to get something approved, seems to me like an unforced error, that if there are constraints that have been agreed upon by the company, we should work within those, right? That's a very short list. It's only 6 items here, but I'm sure you could think of a lot more. I'm sure you could think of ways that maybe that you've struggled now or in the past, or maybe that those around you have struggled now or in the past, of these common mistakes or unforced errors that they've committed. So with that being said, I do think that software engineering can be a winner's game. As we talk, going back to thinking about amateur versus professional tennis, as you move in skill level from these amateur competitions to professional competitions, the fundamentals don't go away, right? The Professionals, they still make mistakes occasionally, but you don't see them double faulting as often. You don't see them missing easy shots. They've mastered those fundamentals. And so on a similar vein, I think we as software engineers, as we begin to master those fundamentals and begin to learn from our mistakes and to stop committing the same unforced errors over and over, we begin to master the game of software engineering. And that's when it can become a winner's game. With that, we can start to move faster as we write code faster and get things shipped and deployed and fix problems for our customer faster. We begin to solve harder problems. We move on to bigger and bigger things, things that are important to the business or the company as we solve these core problems for our customers. We can help others grow, right? We can help mentor other software engineers and developers in our company, and help them to learn and to grow and to progress in their careers. And finally, we begin to innovate. This is where the real magic happens, where we begin to create new solutions within software engineering that can really fundamentally change our business and ourselves and the world around us. So with that, I think we're wrapping up pretty close to the end of the talk. But I just invite you to spend some time pondering. Think about this idea of losers' games and winners' games. Think about, what mistakes do I frequently make? What can I learn from my mistakes? And how can I stop making those mistakes? I think as we can do that, we can learn to level up ourselves and really move from this loser's game to a winner's game in software engineering. And a final invitation, again, just learn to play the game. Software engineering is a loser's game. I think that's true for a majority of us. It's a loser's game. Learn to play it well. A simple strategy to simply progress in your career is to learn from mistakes, learn to stop making those, learn to be more consistent and reliable. And then finally, again, figure out how to turn it into a winner's game. Thank you. That's all that I have. Hope you enjoyed the talk. If you want to find me again, you can find me online in all the usual places, and especially my website, tylerhawkins.info. Again, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for those presentations that we just had. And we are, it's time for us to start our Q&A session. And looks like it's getting dark-ish at my place where I'm at. So let me turn on some light. Yeah, and let's invite our panelists. Let's invite our speakers. We have Kat with us. Hi, Kat.
Hello.
And we have Tyler. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
How are you doing, Kat?
Doing pretty good. It's funny, you're turning on your lights and I'm in the dark, so perfect.
and you're about to witness the dusk, I guess.
Yep. Sun is about to rise here.
Yeah. Awesome. So thank you very much for your presentations. And we have some questions from the audience. And we can start with some questions about accessibility. And I encourage everyone, both of you, if you have some view on the questions that were asked to the, I guess I can't call you counterparts. No, like to the previous speaker. So Tyler, if you want to add something about accessibility, and Kat, if you want to add something about these like this winner-loser game, this work ethic, how to grow as a developer. So let's contribute to this discussion together. So I'll start with some questions to Kat, and this one is I guess one of the technical questions. So Kat, I noticed that in your presentations, you added role list to the div element. Does it matter whether it's div or UL for a semantic point of view?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a div or a UL. Adding the role of list will semantically change that div element to read out as a list. So either one works. The role of list kind of helps apply rules and connotations to elements that aren't already defined by that element. So UL already is defined as a list, so you might not even need to add the role of list to it. But if you're using a div, you need to add that role, so then semantically it works with screen readers.
Okay. Thank you. And we have a question for Tyler. Hi, Tyler. Do you have your own way of documenting your mistakes, blockers for personal use or company use for knowledge sharing purposes?
Yeah, it's a good question. It will very much depend on the topic or the category of the mistake, you could say. I think there are a lot of things, right, that we could automate for. So if there are like common style guide or just simple mistakes, right, like ESLint is great for that. Or if you have formatting standards, Prettier is great for that. So if it's things like that, as far as like coding styles go, or just common mistakes there, oftentimes what we'll do is automate it, right? So make sure that even if you make that mistake internally, the linter or the automated test or whatever will catch it for you beforehand. So that saves a lot of time. So that's a way as a company you can kind of level up and help with that. For things that can't necessarily be automated, I'm a big fan of documentation. So oftentimes, whatever you use, if it's Notion or Confluence or whatever, I'm sure you have some sort of wiki system. But oftentimes we'll create like either team standards or company standards as far as like, this is how we do things. And oftentimes in those sections, like we'll have a section on, expectations and kind of the standards that we hold ourselves accountable to. And we make sure that everyone in the team or everyone in the company is aware of these and knows about these, because that way it's very easy to point to that, right? If someone's doing something that doesn't quite line up with your expectations, you can say, hey, just so you know, like, this is our expectation right here. Totally fine, but hopefully this will help you moving forward, right? So anyway, kind of a two-part answer. Automate what you can, document the rest.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we have another question for Kat. Kat, is it possible to do accessibility testing on components?
Yes, you can definitely do accessibility testing on components. I think I mentioned a little lightly in my presentation, it wasn't all about accessibility testing, but there's a lot of built-in ways that you can run accessibility tests on your components. I know Core kind of builds in some like automated scans that you can pipe into your pipeline. So if you're hooking up some like general unit tests and other like types of testing for your components, you can definitely build in some accessibility testing. Maybe I'll follow up with a really good presentation on how to do good accessibility testing.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that. Yeah, just to piggyback on that, like you mentioned the Core rules, like there are libraries specific to test tools. So you could use like Just Axe or Cypress Axe, and they'll run a set of accessibility tests on there. So there's some things that you can automate. And then if you want to do things in like a CI pipeline, you could use something like Lighthouse integrates with CI, or there's also GitLab has one. I haven't tried it, but it's called Pally or Pally. It's PALOY or 11Y. So yeah, there's things you could do at like the linter level, the Jest level, Cypress level, CI level, as well as manual testing as well, right?
It's actually quite funny. I've heard a lot of people recommend Lighthouse. I even saw a presentation back in spring, and I have yet to try out Lighthouse, but I noticed it's an interesting tool because it runs a huge different suite of tests that you can run on your browser as one of their plugins. But I haven't tested out their accessibility automated scans, so I'm curious to test that out.
Yeah, another cool tip from me, but this is not related to accessibility. This is to visibility. If you have a light theme on your interface, you can always increase your brightness and that's regarding the lighting in my room. Just kidding. Yeah. So here's another question for Tyler. Tyler, in your experience regarding the mistake of not understanding the problem before coding, are there more effective ways to help beginners who struggle with it?
Yeah. So the example that I gave, right, was someone was learning how to test, and they were kind of struggling along because they weren't familiar with testing or they weren't familiar with the framework or library they were using. So this is it is a real live example of something I encountered a while ago, and I think what this person in particular struggled with was kind of this mentality that when you're on the job, you need to be doing task work or sprint work 100% of the time. And so I don't think it really like sunk in or occurred to them that like as software engineers, we're knowledge workers, and part of our job is being paid to learn and to keep our skills current, and that it's totally okay to go watch a tutorial on the job. Like you don't have to do that just at night or in your spare time or whatever. Again, granted, it will vary by company. Like I've worked in companies that have been very good about encouraging learning and saying like, hey, you have 10% time or 20% time to go learn about whatever, or hey, don't feel guilty. You have 4 hours a week to watch stuff and keep current. So again, the company can help promote that kind of mentality. But just like mentoring with a junior engineer, I think helping give that mindset to them of like, hey, if you're struggling with this, like, don't bang your head against your desk for 3 hours, like just like struggling, like take a step back for a minute. Like it's okay to go watch a video. It's okay to go read the docs, like have kind of that mentality of learning, and that it's okay to not just feel like you have to be working on this task because you feel like you have to be doing this sprint work 100% of your time. So that's the advice that I would give, and that's the advice that I did give in this scenario.
Oh, Tyler, even you mentioning it, I'm like, oh, there's been so many problems I've encountered in my work that have been just so challenging. So yeah, I'd also encourage people that like if you're tackling a really hard software problem and it's not working, do take some time away, watch tutorials. I feel like especially when in my work, when I'm trying to solve something or work on something that's really new for our site, sometimes a lot of my work will just be looking and researching and reading a lot of articles and looking up, okay, here's 5 different tools that we can use, and then looking in the pros and cons in each, and then evaluating which ones would work on our site. So there's a lot of knowledge gathering that I have to do my day-to-day. So it's definitely part of your job.
Yeah, and it's always easier, and it's always, I would say, even from a managerial standpoint, cheaper to allow your engineers to have like some spare time, like to watch a 30-minute tutorial how to deal with something, than let them spend like 3 hours trying to figure it out by themselves, just walking like blindly on the walls, like trying to find exit. Yeah. So here's another question, which I think is pretty interesting. So this one may be a little bit like beginner-ish, and maybe it was for one of our previous presentations. But Kat, I think you can answer this one. Kat, why are hoverovers considered bad for accessibility?
Well, I wasn't able to watch the previous presentation that this is referring to, so I'll try and get my best stab at it. Hoverovers, it depends. If, say, you have an icon on your page, it's really great to have like a tooltip or a hover thing to sort of display what it means. So if like a good example is on your desktop, if you see like the little icon for Wi-Fi, it's really great to have a little hover over to sort of say what that is for, that it's the internet icon. So that's really helpful for like explaining like if there's no text visible. But in general, having things that are on hover, it's really challenging for various accessibility tools to be able to activate the hover and sort of maintain it, especially if you have interactive content or buttons inside of that hover experience. If it has to be on hover to pop up, it doesn't work well on mobile. It doesn't really work well with keyboard users. And by extension, like other screen reader users have difficulty with hover content. So it's really important to keep your hover content very simple, just doing like maybe text and making sure that the text can be presented when you do activate that icon. But overall, try and avoid hover experiences if you can.
Yeah, and some keys there, like if you look at WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, right, is our source of truth of what we look to and what we try to conform to. They talk about that, about hover, is that if you have stuff that appears on hover, make sure it also appears on focus, right? So it needs to have that tab index on it, so it has a tab stop, so that keyboard users can also make it open as well. And then you also mentioned like having interactive content within that. That's a pretty big anti-pattern. Like if you can have a tooltip that appears on hover, like it should be very short supplemental text, right? So you mentioned like an icon button, you have a little delete button, and then you hover over it and it says delete, right? So make sure it's short stuff. If you have like longer stuff, like maybe there are buttons or links within this kind of tooltip-esque component, it's much better to use something like a toggle tip, which stays not on hover or focus, but on click or key press, and treat it more like a modal. That way you can send focus to it, you can trap focus inside it, and users will actually be able to get to the interactive content without it disappearing on them.
Yep.
Yeah, I just recently experienced one website, so just reflecting on that one, it was like I just can't imagine how it's just a nightmare of a hover, because it's a hover cluster, you know what? Because like when you hover over the thing, you have a long drop down. So let's say it's a classified for something. So let's say you hover over that thing and it's like cars, and then you have all the brands like your BMWs and your Lexuses, and then you hover over that one, and it's just a nonsense, like a tree, like a long branch, and it's very. I just can feel how it's sort of intimidating to try to navigate those things just with a keyboard, or I don't know, or with a voiceover. I cannot imagine like using that website with the voiceover.
Oh yeah, right. And Kyler, I really enjoyed that you quoted some WCAG rules. I was like, ooh, pro skills over there. I need to get better at all the rules and regulations from like WCAG defines.
Okay, let's look at this one. This one is another one about the accessibility. How to use area labels with localization to several languages.
I think it's really critical. I think the main thing is to really build out your globalization infrastructure. Within our site, we have this place where we store all of our strings, and we have localization, and like we have providers who change and like convert it to different languages, and then we were able to inject it in our page depending on the different language. So there's no really accessibility specific tooling there that I know of, except to really invest in storing your strings and globalizing them.
Right. Just to piggyback on that, it's the same process, whether it's an ARIA label text or it's a visible text in the page. Just whatever you're using to translate your messages to get new strings, you'll just use that same translated string, whether it be visible or ARIA label. So no difference. If you know how to localize stuff, you know how to localize ARIA labels.
Okay. So another one. So I guess this one has pretty similar answer, and I believe this one is from Inspired with the same. So this one is a continuation of the question. So how to properly use tabs and LTR website. So I believe it's left to right website. So it's just, I guess there is no like specific tips for that. So I guess it's just the same with the localization, or if you happen to know.
Right, it's localization. There's also some just creating, like it's all those frameworks around globalization in certain languages and changing your content, whether it's left to right languages or right to left. So creating a really good experience for that. Tabs should be the same, and as long as you're making those adjustments to your website to allow it to flip correctly, the tabs will follow suit.
Okay. Here's another one for Tyler. Tyler, please continue the list if we still have some time.
Well, maybe we'll save that for a blog post or something. Yeah, no, I'd encourage people to think about that though. Like it was a short list. That was just like a few minutes of brainstorming, right? Of, hey, these are some mistakes that I've seen. I'm sure you all have seen mistakes in yourselves or in others that you've maybe made mental notes of in the past. Yeah, maybe we'll do a blog post about that at some point.
Okay, and we have another question for Kat. Is there any easier way to restrict the tab key press only within the model pop-up when it's open?
Oh, yeah, there are several ways you can do that. I don't recall off the top of my mind, but you can definitely look up, I think, our site, we use Fluent UI as our sort of base component library, and they already have a lot of stuff baked in. But there's definitely ways you can restrict key press within a modal, but just make sure that a user can exit that modal without having to like restart their whole browser. So make sure they have access to like a cancel button to get out the modal.
And if you're looking for like specific package recommendations, right? If you're using like a design system or component library, hopefully they have that baked in. If you're building it yourself from scratch, Focus Trap is a great library. It's Focus-Trap, and then there's also Focus Trap React is the React implementation of that. It's maintained by the same people. But those are really handy ones. Like you basically just wrap your component in this Focus Trap wrapper parent component, and that will handle the trapping for you. So it'll handle modal opens, it sends the focus inside the modal. As they tab, it'll keep them and kind of loop them inside the modal. And then when they exit, it'll send the focus back to the trigger button. So those packages are great. They handle all of those keyboard considerations for you.
Just always make sure a user can get out of the focus trap. That's a big thing that is a struggle for users, is getting stuck in mobile focus traps.
Okay, and we have this question. I think both of you can comment on this one. Kat, how much of the accessibility law regulation is enforced? I'm referring to being exposed to being sued.
Yeah, that happens, off and on throughout the industry. It really just depends. I've chatted with some people who focus more on the legal side, and I'll say that Microsoft, Facebook, a lot of companies have been sued for their websites not being accessible, and really there's no need to be sued. There's a lot of information out there. There's a WCAG rules and guidelines. There's a lot of accessibility vendors and a lot of consultants who focus on creating accessible websites. There are many ways that you can create an accessible experience, at least from a baseline compliance perspective. So it is enforced, and it does happen. So I do encourage websites and people who own websites to really create an accessible experience.
Okay, Tyler, maybe you can add something about this if you happen to know. And
yeah, I'd prefix everything with "I am not a lawyer," right? Take it with a grain of salt.
Not legal advice.
That's right. This is not legal advice. A little disclaimer. I do know that the number of lawsuits is going up over the years, right? If you look at just public numbers from a few years ago to now, like it is going up. People are more aware of it. There's always the good actors versus bad actors, right? Like there are frivolous accessibility lawsuits that are filed, but there also are legitimate lawsuits, right? That there are people trying to use your site or your technology that legitimately can't. And so I think besides just trying to avoid a lawsuit, like the way I kind of always like to pitch it and think about it is that we want to make our sites accessible because it's the right thing to do, right? If you have something that you're trying to make available to the world, hopefully that thing is for everybody. It's not just for able-bodied people. And if you need to kind of pitch it, more in a business standpoint, right? Like hopefully we're internally motivated by moral reasons, but there are, financial and legal reasons as well. So sometimes it's helpful to pitch it to the business as well of like, hey, we can protect ourselves financially by not being sued. If we're maybe a software company, we can open ourselves up to a greater market share by being able to sell this product to people who may have disabilities or who have users who may have disabilities, right? So being aware of the risks of a lawsuit is important, but I try to steer the conversation away from that there are other reasons to consider, right, to be accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one, I guess both of you commented on this one, but I guess this is a great question to wrap up this. And if we can go over them once again, so maybe people can write it down. Kat and Tyler, are there any specific web accessibility guidelines that you recommend developers to pay close attention to when building accessible React components and apps and websites and products in general?
Yes, WCAG, the WCAG rules, they are a really useful, good web standard for accessibility. Everyone uses them. It is built by a huge collection of developers and advocates creating these really good guidelines. I'm actually a part of two community groups around the WCAG rules, guidelines, and creating. There's a group that's called Open UI, where we focus on creating accessible web components in general, like all buttons, clicking interactive content on the web, making sure it's interactive, and a focus group for cognitive disabilities, learning disabilities. So highly recommend you look at the WCAG rules. Those are sort of the industry standard right now. Unless, Tyler, do you know of any other rules that I'm not aware of?
No, 100% agreed. WCAG is the way to go. The current version is 2.2. There's 3 different levels, A, AA, and AAA. So most people try to shoot for AA conformance. So if you're Googling rules, just look for WCAG 2.2 AA. You can go find the WCAG docs. But yeah, that is like the universal international standard. If you're looking for more specific stuff, like it will very much depend on your country. So like the US has specific laws, especially for like federal government agencies. That's like Section 508. There's also specific rules in Europe as well. You might even have your own specific country rules as well. But pretty much all of those are encompassed within WCAG. So if you follow WCAG, you'll be good to go.
Okay. Thank you very much, both of you, Kat, Tyler. Thank you for your presentations, and thank you for joining. We will have tomorrow. We have a senior track, and we will have 10 more speakers. So if you, maybe Kat yourself or you, Tyler, if you need some tickets for your friends and family, maybe your dev team, just shoot us a message. Yeah, and we're excited to have you with us once again, and we hope to see you during our next editions, maybe 2024. And absolutely enjoyed both presentations, and thank you very much, and have a great day, since it's just the beginning of the day at your place.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Our pleasure.
Yeah, see you around.
See you. Alrighty. So I have some announcements. I guess that's it. We have 10 speakers tomorrow. We have some cool presentations. We'll have some presentations, some technical topics. We will have modularity, optimizing use effects for performance, simplifying state management in React and React Native, scaling UI, visual content management, progressive web applications with React. Deep dive into that one. Server state again, deploying applications with Vercel and Pulumi, virtualization, performance, React, and mesoscaling, and lots of great stuff waiting for you tomorrow. So if you need a ticket, use the special promo code that we have and grab yourself a discounted ticket. And also, for those who asked questions today, just shoot us a short message to info@geekle.us, and we'll get you some tickets for your activity. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.